Hello and welcome to episode 193 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the 13th of June 2017. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
E3, the thing that we've been explaining as a reason to not have any news despite just talking about Far Cry for the last 6 weeks or so.
Which we may do so again, who knows?
Indeed, is finally here.
Yay.
Yay.
I feel like I seem to remember in previous years there's usually been like one conference we haven't seen at the time we do the podcast, but this time we've seen all of them, haven't we?
Yeah, though we'll probably get to this, but it's been not the most like staggeringly kind of mind-blowing set of conferences as far as E3s go. I haven't felt too bad about missing most of them because, I haven't stayed up for any conferences this year or anything, and I've mostly just caught up by watching trailers after the fact.
Yeah, for me, they've been neatly divided into can easily watch at normal, reasonable hours and just no way I could possibly stay up for that.
Yeah.
So there's been no decisions to make.
It felt like, previous years is sometimes like an evening where you get like something at 6, something at 9, and something at 2, and so by the time it's kind of worth staying up, but there's been a lot of 5 a.m., 4 a.m. conferences this year, because I guess they're shunting them into the evening Pacific time, and that's just basically at that point.
I was looking at, so I've been watching on Twitch and YouTube and Steam, weirdly. Steam's website, not even Steam itself, but like the PC gaming show was streamed from there, which I haven't seen before. Steam wins out of those three because it turns off chat by default. And on the others, it is like, I was watching the EA one on YouTube, and the chat, it scrolls past at an insane rate. You couldn't possibly read it. But what you can see is the giant ASCII swastikas, the word Hitler again and again and again, and the N-word again and again and again, and then Battlefront 2. The entire content of the...
If you replace Battlefront 2 with Mount and Blade 2, it's pretty much identical for the PC game.
Yeah.
There's always, that's a Twitch concept.
I actually didn't realise that that we were going to have an actual Bannerlord trailer at the
They were rewarded, yes.
Yeah, and as soon as that started happening, like I had... like flashback, like I had my kind of like Warzone flashbacks to running the PC Gamer live stream at the weekend of 2 years in a row, where just people demanding Bannerlord for some reason for days.
Yeah, looks all right.
It looks all right.
Quite good.
It looks all right.
I suppose.
So we need to dwell on that. So this is going to be a very E3 heavy pod, because there's loads to talk about, really.
Yeah, it was nice, actually, although we're saying it's maybe not the most overwhelming E3 ever, but it does feel like I haven't really had anything on my radar at all before this. And this reminded me of some things, and also, obviously, loads of new stuff.
Yeah, so we should probably just jump in, see where we end up. And to be honest, it would make sense if we started and got out of the way Far Cry 5, I'm going to suggest. Because we knew we'd find out more at E3. They've trickled out information, and this is the first time I guess we've seen it. Well, it was that thing. It looked like they were setting up a kind of like a proper gameplay demo, by which I mean the live playing of the game. But then it was sort of intercut with obviously cutscene bits and descended into pure trailer. So in terms of what you actually do in the Far Cry beyond spot people and shoot them, there wasn't a lot to go on.
Yeah. So there's a scene where like the player was creeping down towards some militia people near a truck and had an NPC sniping from a tower, sort of talking over comms and waiting for the player to sort of break stealth and then she fires. But yeah, when she actually fires, it's kind of a cutscene. So I don't know if that's how it works in the game. I hope not. And yeah, we didn't really, I wouldn't say they showed anything that made it look interestingly different to previous Far Cry's. I'm still pretty optimistic for it because I just think the completely independently of the story side of the Far Cry games, the mechanics of them have been kind of getting better over the iterations, for me anyway, for the outpost-oriented gamer, which is me. They've been sort of...
That's your YouTuber name.
They've been going deeper and deeper on that, and as I said previously, there's an interview where they say they would like to apply that kind of approach from any angle philosophy to the main plot, and that would be amazing if they do even 10% of that. I can't remember if we mentioned this before, but I heard that you get to choose your gender in this one.
Oh, cool.
It can be man cop or lady cop.
Did produce the best screenshot of E3 this year, which is a woman in the background with a baseball bat chasing a dog with an assault rifle in its teeth, and the protagonist's hand reaching out to grab the assault rifle as the dog ferries it to you.
That's pretty good.
Pure video games.
If you're going to have bull shots, you might as well have them
Yeah,
be
it's
like that.
total bullshot. There's no way it looks like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when they first brought it out on stage at the Ubisoft conference, there was they did the sort of like, things are serious in Hope County, Montana. Nobody knows how we're going to survive this horrible thing that's happened. Bomb pontoons! bombs, cars, dogs. And there's a big, there was a pretty big disconnect between ostensible kind of, chin strokey topical setup and total video game.
I kind of fell apart even before the trailer started because he said, he's trying to describe the atmosphere in Hope County, and he says, people are fucking scared. And just because he said the word fucking, a lot of the crowd laughed because apparently it's that kind of crowd. And so then he kind of like made a joke of it as well and said, I had to say it. It was like, this is weird tonally now.
Yeah, it was weird. Like, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that this is going to be like one of the fun Far Cries. I mean, they're all fun, but you know what I mean? Like, not totally taking itself too seriously. And they emphasized co-op in that trailer as well. So I feel like a lot of the sort of discussion when they first revealed that art about whether or not the setting was going to be controversial, the petition that some obviously bored people made to get it taken down as offensive against white American people. That probably is going nowhere now that it's been revealed to be a wacky game about flying a big yellow plane.
Wasn't there another outcry from that corner of the internet about Wolfenstein?
There was, yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
They're actual Nazis.
Exactly. There's been a lot of great jokes about that. There's someone remade the final cuts of the trailer as a GIF, but when the splash page for Wolfenstein 2 shows up, it's not Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. It's Wolfenstein 2, so much for the tolerant left. Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Someone was suggesting a mod where every time one of them dies, they say so much for the tolerant left.
Let's talk about Wolfenstein.
Let's talk about Wolfenstein. I think that was the first game revealed at the C3 that so I watched all of the Bethesda conference. Generally was the first one that contained things that I was like, oh, cool, a thing I didn't know was happening that is cool. But yeah, Wolfenstein 2 is definitely one of those things. It's a weird trailer, but it looks great.
It's so strange, but I really like it because it shows it's kind of doubling down on the strange mix of tones that Wolfenstein 1 somehow pulled off madly.
Yeah.
And it's got like moments of genuinely really good like sight gags, stuff that you don't see executed well in games ever, like the robot arm that malfunctions and the guy who's trying to eat a biscuit and ends up hitting himself in the face with a biscuit. It's just a really funny, well-timed piece of kind of visual performance that is just it could do that, but it could also have BJ Blazkowicz like raving at a socialist, getting up out of a table with a cup of tea in his hand, kicking a table across the room and saying, I've got a kid on the way, I'm not going to raise him in front of any goddamn Nazis.
And then firing 2 quad-barreled shotguns in each hand.
10 out of 10 already as far as I'm concerned. It looks like an absolute riot, and I can't wait to play it.
It was surprising. So there's at least two pseudo adverts at the start, and then there's a bunch of kind of cinematic stuff, but then there's just a lot of like conversations in that trailer. It's like 70% just people talking in a room.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then like 30% dual quad-barreled shotguns.
It's weird because like the New Order, not the first Wolfenstein game, that's ridiculous. Because this is Wolfenstein 11, it's worth bearing in mind. Like the reason I think that it's Wolfenstein 2, but with like a Roman numeral 2 is because it is actually 11. It's a surprisingly talky game as well, a surprisingly writing heavy game, and surprisingly well written. I think that's the thing that took everyone by surprise is that it's enormously overwritten, but in a sort of deliberate way. Like it's hyper, it's hyper large in everything it does. So the dialogue is kind of very heavy with imagery and kind of big characters and big personalities, and all the performances are really big. But I think it's weird, like the way it ties together all those sort of disparate things and somehow holds together is because it's all sort of executed with the same amount of energy. Like whatever it's doing, it's always doing something 211 basically. And the LSD trip bit at the end, or the guy popping a tab of acid and then just seeing a little chameleon that someone's obviously hand drawn onto that environment. I don't know if that's just for the trailer, but God knows.
Yeah, it goes beyond anything that was in the first game. The first game did have that type of humour, but it's obviously done very well for them because there seems to be a lot more resources in at least the presentational side of the dialogue stuff and the cutscene stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of trust machine games to make a really good, exciting shooter. Just if it just feels like the first game. The first game was all right stealth game actually. Some of the levels are actually quite good at letting you stealth around and get up behind Nazis. I
think it worked as a stealth game predominantly because it was also brilliant if it stopped being a stealth game. There's a bit in the Old Blood where it's an instant fail stealth, and I think that's the first part of that game that I really didn't like because it should just let you start firing shotguns at people really in order to take advantage of its strengths. But yeah, totally. They didn't seem to reveal very much by way of like mechanical changes to the game. Like you can see that Vijay Vaskovitz has the power suit from the first game, which you don't actually wear, you just find as part of the plot. But I didn't see if there was anything that would necessarily show that you can use the sort of superpower stuff that another character gets in.
No, there's a bit where he rides a robot dog that can breathe fire.
Yes, that's true. Actually,
there's a bit where he's in a stilt walker type device, climbing over some walls. So I think there's going to be a lot of plugging that suit into bigger suits to do exciting things,
or onto a dog,
Yeah, even better.
I enjoyed the sort of cut of like 60s American television, but in Nazis. They did at the beginning of the trailer, because that is a weird trailer because it's sort of quite a lot of like contiguous cutscenes and contiguous play, but also trailer stuff, and it's like 9 minutes long.
Yeah,
like it feels like two different videos mashed together.
They submitted the wrong cut of this to the conference, and it has it run by accident, and are they now sort of owning it? But apparently, it just wants to be its own thing and just have a really unconventional trailer format, and not just sort of show the game for 9 minutes straight, which is I admire the fact it's putting its tone up front, especially because it's a shooter and you kind of know what you're getting there, and watching 9 minutes of it isn't going to tell you a huge amount about what the shooting is.
Yeah,
like.
And I think Bethesda didn't really have a massive hitter. They didn't have a new Fallout or a new Elder Scrolls.
No, that's true.
And so they needed this to fill that role, and I think it can, but you have to sort of convince people that it's something different, that it's not just a mindless shooter, even though it has that aspect to it. And so they stressed the elements that weren't that, and that probably was effective.
I have to admit, I was not disappointed, but it sort of stood out to me that, it begins with BJ Blazkowicz waking up from a coma. Again. Like, he's a sleepy boy. Like, that seems to be the subtext, is that he's like awake for 36 hours for the duration of a Wolfenstein game, then has a big sleep.
Actually, yeah, I'd really like it if, it's not because he has sustained some new injuries, it's just those old injuries. Like, you wake up from a coma, you're all right for like maybe a day, but you're going back.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he gets another sequence in which he kills loads of Nazis in a hospital gown.
With his bum hanging out.
His ass hanging out, yeah.
In one case, killing lots of Nazis while apparently like doing a bum slide along a conveyor belt with a shotgun in each hand.
Yeah, sure, he got there.
It's weird that they've made that character so likable.
Yeah.
Like his sort of weird folksy wisdom and strange philosophizing and anger and like
John Cena's face.
Yeah, exactly. With John Cena's face. Yeah,
excellent. Right,
yeah, very exciting.
That one down.
Yeah. Also of the Bethesda conference, and definitely of interest to us, is Dishonored 2: Death of the Outsider.
Yeah.
Very excited about this.
Yeah, which is a standalone expansion for Dishonored. Like, it is coming out separately. So
Expandalone. I knew there was some DLC coming. Well, I knew something was coming, and I thought it was DLC, but it turns out to be this. And that's really exciting that it's standalone. Not because obviously I own the game, but that suggests it's going to be of substantial length, like more than 2 hours, I would think.
I was wondering if it was going to be equivalent to like all of the Dowd stuff from Dishonored 1, so Knife of Dunwall and Brigmore Witches, so back to back rather than just one of those things.
And you are Megan Foster, aka... Well, okay, so this is a mild spoiler for Dishonored.
Yeah, so this is really funny. So, Tom, have you finished Dishonored?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
Dishonored 2.
Dishonored 2.
Does it matter?
Probably not a huge...
It's going to be hard to avoid. In fact, if you've read an interview about it, feel like you will have had the information
don't
communicated
worry.
to
I
you
don't mind.
already.
So,
like they are
and it was funny because
straight
this was it was interesting watching Twitter to see who obviously hadn't played through the end of Dishonored 2. So yes, they can't potentially hold on to this as a spoiler now because they're basing a expansion around it. But
yeah.
so Megan Foster, who is the captain of the ship in Dishonored 2, is Billy Lurk, who was Dowd's second in command in the Knights of Dunwall DLC.
Right.
So you can figure this out like very early in Dishonored 2, but she tells you at the end, basically.
It'd be kind of amazing if they tried to keep the secret and they promoted this whole expansion just saying you play as ship captain Megan Foster doing sailory things.
And she knows
with
Dowd
no
for
secret
some
life.
reason. One interesting thing they've given them, sort of interesting problem, is that it's like, so Dowd is obviously has always been quite a strong character for them, and Bigmore Witches ended up being very important for Dishonored 2. Billy Lurk was just one of those characters that kind of like people liked in different, and then she came back. But both of them are a million different forms of quantum dead in that universe now. So they're obviously establishing a sort of canon where both Dowd and Billy Lurk have survived to do this thing. But Dowd can kill Billy Lurk in Knights of Dunwall. Corvo can kill Dowd in Dishonored. I think you can kill Megan in Dishonored 2.
It took me a while to realise that because I don't think there's any... okay. There kind of is a reason you might. But I just discovered, she's attackable.
Yeah.
That's how all murders happen.
Yeah, quick save, try it.
But
also she has, in this expansion she has a missing eye and a missing arm, which she also does in Dishonored 2, but even that is not necessarily the only way that the plot can go. Obviously they have to just pick an outcome. Although, like, the running theory before this was announced was that the obvious DLC for them to do seemed to be that you play as Megan Foster before the events of Dishonored 2 and have a kind of prequel, but they're not doing that.
That's true. Like, I thought, obviously it's called Death of the Outsider. The Outsider is in Dishonored 2, so it can't be a prequel. But also the trailer that they put out ends with Megan kind of opening the doors to wherever Dowd is, and that is her epilogue scene in Dishonored 2. So, like, there's a piece of art over the credits of Dishonored 2. There's like art showing various world state things, and one of them is Megan opening a door, and Dowd is there. So
the thing about the expansion is that your mission is to kill the outsider.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people actually really upset about that, saying, I don't want to kill the outsider.
Fucking
kill him. I hope he dies in the intro.
I'm in that camp, I think, of people who are a little bit... Well, I think it's extremely poignant to want to kill the outsider, but...
Yeah, I hope they go through with it, both because I don't like the outsider as a character, but also because it's just nice to put a bow on it, like just for any given... I hope there'll be a Dishonored 3, but... I don't like it when a series never moves forwards and can't do away with any part of it and sees it all as like, the format is this. So it'd be nice to
and it's sort of
shift it.
There's like, it's interesting. Like, they're the perfect two characters to be doing that. Because I do like the outsider and I like the role plays in the story, and that's actually largely in part to a couple of brilliant pieces of writing by Hazel Monforton, who did an article about sort of interpreting the outsider slightly differently for PC Gamer, but who's also a writer on this. So hopefully they can bring in a few more of those sort of, make some of the underlying themes that make the outsider more than just a magic man who dispenses magic powers, bring that through. But like, it's sort of implicit in the story of Dishonored is the fact that, the outsider empowers people who either, do good things with the powers that he gives them or do terrible things with the powers that he gives them. He sort of provides the means for people to get revenge, but he doesn't actually sort of steer any of that. And in that story, the person who basically fucks up being given the outsider's powers the most is probably Dowd. Like, of all the people who, obviously you can do a cool playthrough as Corvo or as Emily where they turn out to be total fuck ups, but Dowd basically is like, he has the choice. He can go on a mission to redeem himself after he's killed the Empress at the beginning of Dishonored 1, but he always does that. So of all the people who might go, when he says at the end of that trailer, like, we're going to kill the bastard that's responsible for all this chaos. It's like, well, you're a bit responsible for all this. You know, like, it's kind of your fault. Like, it wasn't his fault that he gave you magical powers and you decided to just become a murderer for hire and stab the Empress to death.
Interestingly, in this expansion, her powers are not the result of the outsider, or the powers that she uses in the expansion are the result of like a magical replacement arm and eye that are made of artifacts that let her do crazy different things, which might be like a conscious rejection of the outsider's gifts in favour of others that she can use to kill him.
Yeah, maybe that's why she's being sent to kill him, because if Dowd did, maybe the outsider could just
deactivate him.
Yeah, switch him off. Sleep.
Bummer. And some of her powers sound really cool. So there's an interview that Harvey Smith did with IGN where he describes her equivalent of Blink as being displacement, where she picks, I think, a person. I'm not sure if she could do this with objects. Maybe that's an upgrade thing. And she sort of displaces them, just occupies their space. I'm not sure if it swaps them or whether she takes their place, in which case what the fuck happens to the person she
oh man, I really hope it's swapping, and I suspect that's the kind of thing they would do, because it leads to so much cool stuff. The overlap between Dishonored mechanics and heat signature mechanics is getting larger by the day, because the whole thing of, like, Dowd's thing of pausing whilst blinking has ended up being pausing whilst choosing where to go is a key part of heat signature, but also is just shitloads of teleport mechanics, and also one of them is a swapper where you switch places with a person.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It'd be interesting to see how much of, because they merged parts of Dowd's skill set into Corvo's through the upgrade tree in Dishonored 2, like his pause blink and things. So it'd be interesting to see if he gets new stuff. Is he playable or is he?
Dowd?
Yeah,
I don't know,
because I wondered if they were going to have two protagonists again. But
there was something in the press release about a New Game Plus, where you can play with some of the powers from Dishonored 2, I think. It didn't. I think the implication was it was still Megan, but you can use some of, after you completed it, you can then have some of the Dishonored 2 powers as well.
Cool.
There's no reason. I mean, they experimented successfully with allowing you to just mix and match Corvo and Emily powers.
Yeah, I still haven't actually done another playthrough since then and found out how that pans out, because that's something that's really interesting.
Do we know when it's out roughly? I can't remember if they.
They did say it's September.
Oh, great.
So it's not too far off. So so the end of the year is now filling up with stuff that we'll inevitably do spoiler casts about. Hopefully a shorter one. But yeah, that's really exciting. I like just them bringing back that particular re-recording of What Should We Do with the Drunken Whaler. Yeah. For the beginning of that trailer was it looks like it's set in Dunwall for one thing, or at least mostly in Dunwall.
By pure chance, I had watched the Drunken Whaler trailer again recently.
The Whaler trailer.
The Whaler trailer. And man, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's just such a perfect piece of.
I did also love their use of a cover of Fleetwood Mac's "Godless Woman" for the Dishonored 2 trailer last year. I loved that. I mean, I love that album. So that, but I
can't remember what I thought of the music, but the sort of weird mix of live action and CG was a bit jarring for me.
Oh, that wasn't the live action trailer. Okay. That was for it was the gameplay trailer for last year's E3.
Oh yeah, like the first one they showed. Showed of it. Was it?
Yes. It wasn't the announcement. It wasn't the CG announcement. It was it was the one with has loads of bits from the game in it, and it has God's One by Fleetwood Mac, which I thought was a really good music choice. They get those covers done. Like that's not they don't those aren't like existing covers of those. I mean, obviously the Drunken Whaler one was obvious because it was the words of Drunken Sailor were changed to be Dishonored, but no, that it was really hard to track down that Godless Woman cover. Problems you have if you are sufficiently interested in just pretending you're in a Dishonored trailer all the time.
Yeah, the assassination game that was revealed was Assassin's Creed Oranges.
Yeah, it's very orange as well.
Yep.
Very orange, as Egypt
Orangey,
is
yellowy
in the past.
They are. This is the one. Since they said, "Oh, we're not going to do an annual installment because we want to take a step back and really reevaluate the series and make sure it's
not sure about that
significant break." Yeah, it hasn't really blown us away with how different it is from the Assassin's Creed formula. The main thing that's different seems to be RPG mechanics, which is like if you. Before this, if you'd asked me, does Assassin's Creed have RPG mechanics? I would have been like, I think so.
It has tower defense, for heaven's sake. It's got
yeah, exactly.
Every other mechanic
it's
on
like,
the way to there.
They took a step back and they thought, oh, well, the problem with Assassin's Creed is it's trying to be almost every other game. maybe it could be all other games, including Skyrim.
We need to step back so we can get a bigger run-up
Yeah.
of doing every game.
So you find your character has seems to be sort of specializing in bows as well as melee weapons, and they make a huge deal of being able to use bows in the middle of a fight. And so it's like it's a hotkey basically. You hit it and you fire your bow. And there's a shotgun bow. There's a SMG bow because there's one that fires multiple arrows in a spread, which is the shotgun one, and then there's one that fires 5 arrows rapidly without having to draw the string back again. And I'm like,
How?
that's not really a bow then, is it? And then there's a sniper bow that's really long range and lets you zoom in. But in the gameplay that I've seen, you find these weapons and they have damage values. It tells you this one does. I think they found a shield that did like 576 defense, and then the next one did 840 defense. And so it's those kind of numbers. It's like almost MMORPG numbers. And enemies have levels, and it'll warn you when enemies are too high level. And if you are trying to do a stealth attack on someone, it's only an insta-kill if they're sort of roughly your level. If they're way above you, it doesn't insta-kill them, it just does a bunch of damage, which is a big... that's probably the biggest change, I would say. That was previously sort of part of the philosophy of the whole series, was that, stealth kill is...
A knife in the neck is a knife in the neck kind of thing, yeah.
And there's a part of me that thinks, oh god, you can't take that away, that's the that's the essence of stealth games. But there's another part of me that thinks that it does make it kind of flat to have that rule, because it is true that basically, the only thing they could vary in Assassin's Creed was just more guards, I guess. Like, there wasn't really...
Putting a roof above somebody so you can't fall on them.
Yeah. Whereas this lets them give a bit of kind of texture to the world, and there can be areas that are scary to go into and things that you can't take on yet. So that might be kind of satisfying. I'm sort of have an open mind to it. And Egypt's a cool place.
Yeah.
To look around that.
I think I said on the podcast like a month or two ago, like one thing I'd really like from the Assassin's Creed series is a proper combat system, because it's never really had one. It's always just been like a counter and insta-kill kind of power fantasy thing. And then I saw their new combat system in this, and I was like, oh, not like that. A weird kind of very strange, unrealistic dodge moves.
Yeah.
And, the game pauses Zelda style with every strike.
It's actually quite a lot like Zelda.
Yeah,
like,
it looks
weirdly,
Zelda-like.
Even things like there's a bit in the trailer where he like leaps off something and then goes into slow-mo with the bow in midair, which is directly from Breath of the Wild. Like, that whole mechanic is just in that game. So, I mean, and Breath of the Wild is a brilliant game. I don't know if it's necessarily the right fit for Assassin's Creed, because it's a very different fantasy. Like, Link bopping a goblin is not.
But I mean, all the movements were very cartoon in a way that just didn't fit the kind of hyper-realistic Assassin's Creed style. So watching a guy strafe dodge in a semicircle sideways 90 to get 90 degrees around an opponent looks super weird when it's not Link doing it. And also the kind of repeatedly hitting guys and having the screen pause and the weapon leaving like a glowing red trail, again, is just so kind of weirdly fiction breaking for that series, which has always been about like
what's the fact that like, so the
assassinations.
thing we didn't mention is you have an eagle, or is it a hawk?
Oh, yeah, the psychic eagle.
A psychic eagle straight out of Far Cry Primal that just sits on your shoulder and then flies up in the sky and can scout for you. But it's basically got like the UAV targeting reticle from Call of Duty, like the frame within the frame thing with the cursor in the middle. I was like, why do it that way? Like, they did sort of eagle vision in the previous games, was sort of very specific and washed out the screen in a particular way and was designed in a way that you wouldn't want to control the game from that perspective. It's not subtle, but it had a very specific effect. Whereas this is like, it almost felt like a high-tech gadget.
Yeah, I think there's a button to pause the eagle in midair.
Yeah.
And so you can scan things better.
So,
it is a drone. It's a fucking drone. It's not an eagle, is it, at that stage?
Yeah, I saw that. And the view goes inside the eagle, so you're seeing the eagle's point of view, because normally it's third person when you're flying the eagle. And then it stops exactly where it is. And I couldn't tell whether time had paused or whether the eagle has just stopped in midair.
It's just like hovering. Yeah. Eagles can't hover, can they? No, they
can. I think if there's like a strong wind coming at them, like most birds can do that thing where they just
they ride the updraft. Okay, yeah, but they can't like just stop and flap a lot.
But it is a psychic owl, so maybe it can summon a wind to blow against it so that it can stay still for a bit.
And maybe it's odd to complain about this stuff in a sort of fantasy series about a man who plugs into genetic memories to relive. But at the same time, like the game still establishes a certain degree of realism in its presentation that these things undermine.
Yeah, I think the final shot of that demo where he fires the arrow at the fleeing target, and then you realise about halfway through the arrow's flight that he's controlling the arrow like the Redeemer missile from Unreal Tournament, and he sort of flies it into the back of the guy's head, and it looks really, really silly. Yeah. Like, I don't mind doing I don't mind the game going, okay, you've just fired the arrow that will kill the target, so we're going to now go slow-mo. You do the XCOM style, the Sniper Elite style, follow the bullet thing. That'd be a perfectly reasonable thing to add to Assassin's Creed. But the fact that I realised, you're controlling the arrow now with your mind. Like, I don't know. There's the UI for like swapping out gear and stuff looks a lot like Destiny.
Yeah, everyone's going to rip that off.
Did you see that Luke Smith, who is the lead designer for Destiny 2, was on Destiny 1 as well, tweeted when that was revealed during the Microsoft conference, what a great UI. Which was as close to full-on dev snark as I've seen at this E3, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm so on that. I mean, it'll be a spectacle, but I worry about it. Like, it's always been a very bloated series, and it feels like they haven't really learned anything from taking.
So I think this was the E3 that I might have been a bit grumpy watching the Xbox conference, but this is the E3 I realised that like I genuinely don't have time for a lot of these games now. Like if they'd announced that they were rebooting Assassin's Creed and kind of simplifying it and making it, this is a game about assassinations in a historical open world, and we're going to just make that really, really strong and not worry so much about all the surrounding stuff, and they've kind of gone the opposite direction. I'd have been much more excited about it. And that's been a sort of a kind of a resounding general rule for a lot of the bigger games, I think. One I did want to talk about was Anthem, which is the sort of the reveal of what BioWare have been doing. And so it was teased at the EA conference, just with sort of what it is, which is it's a sci-fi setting that looks a lot like Destiny. It looks a lot like Titanfall, and it looks a lot like sort of Attack on Titan. So I think Attack on Titanfall is the strapline. But
there is a big wall, right?
So there's a very big wall. Beyond the wall are beasts in a sci-fi landscape, and on top of the wall or behind the wall is a sort of human civilization, and people, aka players, venture out into the wild in kind of mech suits, but not like mechs, more like power armor, to nick a joke from Saints Row, that have like sort of different classes and abilities and things. But like, you are quite a humanoid robot. You can fly, which is cool. You're quite a humanoid mech though, so you're not really running around like you're in a stompy robot Titanfall style. You're in a power suit.
The flying is like Superman flying.
Yeah.
You fly head first, and seems to be limitless, just and pretty fast.
And it looks gorgeous. Like the technical execution of it looks phenomenal.
It's like a jungle area that we saw in the full reveal, and it was like, I'm always a little bit, particularly because they made such a huge deal of the Xbox One X, which is a fucking hilarious.
That is the stupidest fucking thing.
They just can't do names, and they made such a huge deal of that. And then all the demos they showed were running on Xbox One X, and like 90% of them, I just go, oh, is that impressive? It doesn't seem at all impressive to me. It seems like if you showed me this 5 years ago, I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. And Anthem was the only thing I saw. It was like, oh shit, actually that looks really good.
It looks amazing. And then, so when they actually formally revealed like the game proper, they showed, a sort of first person sequence in a town, very impressive facial animation, which might be BioWare going, look at the faces of a man sort of asking you to go and do something in the wild, and you get a quest and you go and suit up and you're talking to the characters, and it looks fantastic. And then you go up in the lift with your robot suit, and then it segues into multiplayer co-op. And then they did very forced, weird for a BioWare game, it segues from obviously real dialogue, where presumably might also have choices to make or something like that, BioWare style, into forced scripted conference banter.
Yeah, like, so they're trying to pretend that players are playing this and talking to each other, but the players are so professional and so well performed that it can only be actors.
Yeah, and it's very false feeling. Ubisoft did that a lot for a couple of years, pointedly stopped this year, and everyone else started doing it.
It is the chatter in that first Division trailer, which I feel like almost coined this style of presentation, is so similar to the chatter in Anthem that you could literally just switch them and I don't think you'd notice. Because all of the words they're saying are just made up.
Oh, cool, I found a thing. Steve would love that. Oh, hey, it's Steve.
Yeah. But also, like, it's even, I think, a special filter they put on it too, to kind of, it sounds like radio chatter. And obviously, when you are talking over a mic of voice over IP, there is a bit of distortion and stuff, but it's not this distortion. This is cool distortion.
Like in-world distortion somehow.
Yeah, it's like, it's actually just, it's the echo in your beautiful San Francisco apartment where this is implicitly happening. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed by that. And partly that's because I have a Destiny.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a game where you go off...
We all have a Destiny.
No, I mean, as in, you know what I mean. And, like, so I have, there's a game I'm already excited about playing where you go on missions with your friends, and it's made by people who are I'm far more confident can make a shooter that's rewarding for a long time. Because there are, still games that I'm willing to make those kinds of time investments in. Destiny's kind of rewarded me for that time investment, so I'm happy to offer it. But the big thing is that, like, this has been, in the works for a long time. BioWare have been, I follow a lot of the BioWare writers' room on Twitter, and you sort of seen people kind of like vanish onto the new IP for periods at a time, and then go back to, I think they're making a new Dragon Age, and then onto Andromeda, and then onto other projects and things like that. And so this is my fault, but I had it in my head that BioWare were making some new BioWare thing we didn't know about, which in my head was like, what if this new thing is the new Mass Effect, like something I end up loving? Because I remember when Mass Effect was announced, and I was hoping for Knights of the Old Republic, and they announced something I'd never seen before, and ended up being one of my favorite game series of all time. The fact that they're just not making a BioWare game, as far as I'm concerned, is... I mean, obviously I have to wait and see the benefit of the doubt and see if they announce, I just don't think they would lead with multiplayer co-op missions and loot and quests in the open world if that wasn't the game. If it was actually a single-player game about, going on an adventure with companions and choices and a plot, primarily, I presume that's what they would have shown. And if they were also going to talk about the fact that there's a co-op, that would have been secondary, if that makes sense. At this point, it seems too late for them to say, oh, by the way, it's also a BioWare game as you understand it. So yeah, I was pretty bummed out about that.
My main reaction was that it was really impressive to look at. Really liked the look of the combat; it looked really satisfying. And I'm well up for a new world. And I just kept thinking, I hope I can just play this by myself. As long as I can do that, I don't care if it's not the optimal experience or the intended experience, as long as that's like viable.
For sure. I mean, and to be fair, I loved Star Wars: The Old Republic for the time that I did play it. Like, they have successfully merged those kinds of things into other games before. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh. I think also the other thing is that when they were talking about a new IP, I thought there was a real opportunity for them to do something that isn't that familiar. And maybe when they were planning this, because I think this has been in the works since Mass Effect 3 wrapped up, maybe when they were planning this, there weren't a million sort of kind of gritty alien-style technology, sci-fi games about defending last bastion of humanity against an alien threat that is the other side of a big wall. But there's quite a lot of them now. And, it's one of those things, it's, we'll get onto it. It's the reason all the pirate games are showing up at the same time.
Yeah,
but
this did actually feel like, even more so than previous years, the E3 of convergence, where everyone shows their hand and like, oh shit, we're all making the same things. There's like 3 games and we're all making one of those 3 games.
But I think like when you kind of kick off a project like Anthem, they're going to know that Titan was in the works at Blizzard and that Destiny was in the works, at Bungie, and they're going to be like, what's our answer to that? Yeah. And this is just the time they happen to reveal it, and BioWare are the studio they seem to have been told to make it. Yeah. So it just doesn't seem to play to their strengths. I mean, I enjoyed third-person combat in Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda, but it wouldn't sustain a whole game for me.
No.
It has to have the extra layer of good, kind of lovely narrative BioWare stuff that I enjoy. Without that, and if it's not significantly improving on that, then dead in the water as far as I'm concerned, which is a very, very harsh thing to say about a thing that's just been announced. But those are the stakes.
It is set itself goals that I'm not interested in. Yeah. That's I think the problem with it. Like, I hope it turns out really good, and hopefully it'll be fun to run around in for a bit. Yeah. But it's that thing of, I've been through this journey enough times that, like, I'm not excited at the moment. I don't see a reason to be excited about hour 100 grinding for the next level up, getting ready for the raid, whatever ends up being, like, I
think games like that increasingly have a well, not responsibility, but it would be good if they can show their roadmap, because they're asking so much from players in terms of time that, you know, if it's going to vanish in a year or 2 years, or it's not going to get any follow up. Like Destiny was always kind of fairly upfront about saying, you know, a couple of expansions, sequel, couple of expansions, sequel. So you know it's a long term endeavor, like a decade long thing. That they said. And that Anthem, games like Anthem, kind of need to come out and say that, because otherwise I will play the thing I know will be supported, and rather than gambling on this thing that could, you know, sputter out after 6 months.
Yeah. Were any other studio making it, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, it looks fine. I'll be excited to try it out. Well, visually it's amazing, so I'm happy to try it out. But because it's like, oh, this is what BioWare are doing, that's why it's more of a kind of like, oh.
Yeah, I was hoping for like a modern world RPG, but I don't know where I got that from. I just invented that in my head.
There was a rumor for a while,
right?
Like there was rumored for a while that their new thing. I know what it was. It's because, do you remember that thing they cancelled?
Yeah,
the thing that looked a bit like the Secret World,
the co-op DM versus DM experiment they did. Yeah,
a lot of the sort of a couple of years ago, the rumor pathways got crossed, and people thought that meant that their new big IP was going to be sort of like modern world with magical elements, which again would be really interesting to see them do. Like,
or any studio do well, because I've been watching American Gods recently, and it's just such a visually rich idea that, you know, I've not really seen done in games very well beyond like the Secret World trailers. The game massively failed to deliver on any of that. But someone else could.
Yeah, I think I was so hoping for something that I was like, oh shit, like they haven't done this before. Like I want BioWare to make an X-Files game, basically. Like I think, or something, you know what I mean, where you're like, oh shit, I want to do something in the real world, or I want
like a police procedural, just anything really. Anything new.
Exactly. Anyway, moving on, we should talk about Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's also got open world multiplayer elements. There's, though Michelle Ansel has subsequently clarified that I think it's open world, and this is sort of like almost a GTA.
Yeah, or he wants it to when it exists, which it doesn't yet, I'm certain.
Although there's that beta thing this summer, though, apparently, that people are signing up for. So
the Space Monkey program.
And there was, I think there was some screenshots and things in there.
Yeah,
because they've restarted development on Beyond Good and Evil 2 several times, as far as the rumors I've heard, and that actually gives me some faith in this. I've seen.
Oh, wait, do you mean restarted as in started from scratch or resumed?
Don't know enough to know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've thrown out some ideas, because it's been 16 years.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I really like the trailer and the tone it establishes and the style it establishes, and I'm fine with it being very different. But I'm interested to see what people see, because I've seen a lot of. Given that it's the big announcement, it's the Half-Life 3 that people were waiting for. I saw a lot of very disappointed people on Twitter with the direction they've chosen to take with it.
If you like the first game, it's a disaster tonally. I don't mind what it is at all. I think it's like really colourful and quite exciting. I think it's kind of lame, quite obnoxious delivery in that particular trailer, but I buy into the vision they're putting forward. But if you're interested in the Beyond Good and Evil universe, and obviously they're trading on that directly with the name, then that you're going to be like, what is this? Why is the pig calling that monkey a fucking bastard? And why is that monkey going bang, bang, motherfucker, and shooting over the back of his head with a rifle? It's just, it's almost like a tone thing as much as anything else.
Yeah, I saw, the reactions I saw on Twitter was just like a huge excitement as it was announced, because it was a cold trailer. They didn't say what it was until afterwards, but of course it was opening on a big pig guy, and so you're really thinking, wait, is that Paige from the first game? And then it's not, but still thinking, it still seems like Beyond Good and Evil 2. And so like huge excitement, and then afterwards, since then, I've just seen a sort of succession of negative comments, 100% of them about the swearing. Like, just they're all just, this does not feel like the tone that.
Yeah, which is weird, because I love swearing. It's brilliant.
I have to say, I didn't actually notice it. I'm not like a huge Beyond Good and Evil fan. I played it. I don't think I finished it. I think I played, a number of hours, and I quite like what I played. But I was mostly kind of into the characters and not really actually playing it that much. Like the actual combat and stuff was not super interesting to me. And watching this, it's been so long. I guess I don't really remember the tone of the first game, but it didn't jump out to me as wrong or bad.
I think it's because a lot of people, it was so long ago, when people played it, they were like teenagers or even like kids. And it's an amazing kids game, Beyond Good and Evil 1. Like, it's just full of life and energy, and it's just really pleasant, lovely world. And there's kind of like, obviously there are bad guys and things, but it's a very good versus evil Saturday morning cartoon
Surely it's
story,
beyond
really.
all that.
With photography, and you photograph a whale, and then you go get your thing repaired, and then you do a stealth bit, and it was a very kind of light touch and light-hearted game, and what they showed at E3 was a completely different thing, which is fine, and I kind of dig what they've done, what they're doing. If they hadn't have called it Beyond Good and Evil, they could have saved themselves a lot of trouble with the fans of the original.
I think there's a thing where it's like, it's interesting. This is an interesting thing about sequels generally, particularly long-awaited sequels. Is like, what do you want? The continuation of the thing you liked, or do you want the next thing from the person who made that thing?
Yeah.
And this feels like, I think had it been Ubisoft had given this to a new team after Michel Ancel hadn't made a sequel,
Yeah.
and this is what they'd made, I might share some of those misgivings. But because he's been working on this apparently forever, or in one form or another, if this is what the sort of, I don't know, that original creative team wants to make as Beyond Good and Evil 2, then I'm willing to kind of just go like, okay, cool, go with this. Like, there's a reason you've made these decisions. I look forward to finding out what they are.
Yeah, no one's saying they shouldn't have done it. It's just that that's going to attract some ire.
I did see one person say, cancel this game immediately.
Well, people are saying that.
He's saying you should have done that.
So yeah, like,
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's unnecessary, but it looks fucking astonishing in terms of just an art direction perspective.
Yeah, I think that's they really charm me.
Especially like when the spaceship takes off and it kind of folds up, and it's this kind of almost a mix of like Mexican Day of the Dead meets like this massive skull and crossbones, like pirate wheel she's got just driving it, but kind of matched with just a kind of riot of multicultural ideas meeting in an urban space. Like that's really exciting. The idea of actually kind of parkouring around that and doing deals and stealing stuff, because you seem to be like a band of outlaws, is potentially exciting, but I reserve all judgment because A, it's a very troubled project, and B, it's easy to put lots of money into a trailer like that and get everyone's hopes up.
Yeah.
And until you actually see what actually you're doing minute to minute in the game,
Yeah,
then
for sure.
it's definitely not worth getting too excited.
It had a
about.
bit of the vibe of like the Fifth Element, and also, funnily enough, Prey 2, the bounty hunter one that was ditched. Like that thing of just being in a sort of an environment with no ground, basically.
That in that sense, actually, it does feel a little bit on trend, because we were talking before we started recording about how games are ever 4 years behind where other media are, and Luke Besson has a film out soon. Valerian's coming out soon, which is similar tonally and visually as well. And there's a sort of, I don't know, it felt like one of the most sort of visually inventive and modern looking worlds for a game. I'm not going to say games because we didn't see the game, but like game world kind of concept pieces of anything that was out this year. And so I'm excited for it simply on that basis, I think. It's interesting. I feel like this was almost an example, probably at a lesser scale, of exactly what would happen if they announced Half-Life 3. Which is, there'd be mental crying in the aisles happiness, followed by utter, this isn't the specific thing I wanted, disappointment.
What's weird is that the head of Ubisoft came out and said the reason why they showed Beyond Good and Evil 2 this year was to elicit feedback from the audience. And if it's just a feedback exercise, then that game is nowhere near. Like, I'm amazed it's playable.
Well, the only reason is because I think he meant literally like feedback, as in it's time for people to stop playing it, because the whole thing was about the announcement of that beta program.
Right.
So I assume that means that's what he was I assume that's what he was referring to. Is like, it's time for us to get sign-ups and get people playing it.
Yeah.
So hopefully it does exist.
We shall,
We shall see.
I hope so. Very sceptical.
Yeah.
I hope to be wrong.
Next up on the list, and it is a long list, and we've done it in basically no order, is, so Destiny 2 had a small presence at the Sony thing, mostly to do with PS4 exclusives. The bigger thing that has come out is a release date for the PC version of Destiny, which is October, which is good news, because it means it's not going to follow the console version by much more than a month, which is, I was worried about the 6-month wait kind of
for sure.
deal.
Yeah, that's not too bad. And I think as long as the releases are on parity after that, in terms of expansions and updates, then job done, really.
That's fine. For sure. Does this, do you have any inkling now where you're going to go, which direction you're going to go?
Well, I'll definitely play both, because I have to play Destiny on PC for work. And I think I'll sort of like organically see how it shakes out, see where people end up.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't split my friend group. It might, though.
I think I'm still probably going to go PS4 first. But
I'll definitely play it on September the 6th. Actually, it is now. They moved the release date up slightly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Exciting. Also coming to PC, perhaps unexpectedly, is Monster Hunter, which I don't think it's ever been on PC before, and I've never played. All I know is that a lot of people I know are obsessed with it.
Yeah, I was saying earlier, one of the things I get out of E3 is if you just release all these trailers individually, then I'll just watch the ones I'm interested in, and maybe a couple I've never heard of for sake of experimentation. But when you watch like a big conference, you just watch everything pretty much, unless there's a whole slew of sports in a row, in which case you eventually tune out. But at the Sony thing, most of these like cold opens where you don't know what the thing is until the end, and I watched the whole Monster Hunter trailer not knowing what the hell it was at all. And at the end I was like, oh, that's Monster Hunter. I guess I've never seen Monster Hunter before. And now it's going to be on PC. This is cool because because our friend Alex Wiltshire, I think we were talking about Horizon Zero Dawn actually, which we both love. And he was saying, I wish it was a bit more Monster Hunter-y. I'm like, I don't know that phrase. And now I will know that phrase.
Mm. Yeah, it's an odd one. I've played it. It's on 3DS, and probably there are so many Monster Hunter games. It's really good with friends, and it's about just going out and hunting enormous monsters with just weapons that are about 3 times your size, and kind of comboing and cooperating, and then taking all the bones out of the monster and turning it into an even bigger weapon. And that loot kind of grind element continues for ages and ages. But it's really quirky, it's got a good sense of humour, and it's really bright and vivid, and the monster designs are really exciting. And none of that was evident in the trailer they showed.
Yeah, it seemed like dinosaurs.
Just big T-Rexes. And some of them are big T-Rexes and dragons in Monster Hunter, but you also fight like crazy huge spiders and multi-tier boss arenas with webbing and stuff like that. Like there's loads of... a lot of the excitement of Monster Hunter is in how vivid the creatures are, and you get to learn all their attack patterns and their foibles and the stuff they drop, and you almost gain like a hunter's knowledge of of this wide open area, because you know where all the best spots to find certain animals are and the best spots to find certain materials, and it becomes like you become like a ranger, but also with good co-op fun times.
I am definitely going to hit my limit of games I can play with friends, because I already play almost no games with friends, and so my limit is very low. And this E3 was just like 10 of them that are like, you need 5 friends who are all playing this at the same time as you to get the best experience. And it's an infinitely large game with infinite content, and it will consume your life. And it's like, well, it's going to be one of you then. One of you has a place in my life, and that's all the rest are out of luck.
I just feel like this is a good time for that kind of thing, not on the MMO level, but on the sort of like fun experiences that you can jump into and have, you know, an evening or something of play. Because this will bring us on to Sea of Thieves, particularly, but we'll get into Pirate Game Town, basically. Something that occurred to me playing a bit, I basically sank a lot more time into PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, is like, it's really nice having a game that it's brilliant with friends. Like, I really like it. Like, since I spoke about it last week on the podcast, it's gone from like, I'm surprised that this early access survivally shootery thing that looks a bit janky is so good, and now it's like, actually, this is fucking brilliant. And it's brilliant with other people. And part of that is because it's not as fraught and intense and strenuous on, you know, people's fun as a pure competitive game is, like a team competitive game, but nor is it as long-term demanding as an MMO. It's sort of like a big world that you get to walk around with your friends for half an hour, basically, for the limit of a match, and you have an adventure in that time, and then people can drop in and drop out, and the number of people you need to play is relatively flexible. And not that all games need to be PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds specifically, but I think there's a middle ground between ultra short form competitive multiplayer on the sort of Counter-Strike, game of Counter-Strike end of the spectrum, and super long form co-op where you are playing the same MMO together over the course of weeks and months and gearing up together. That is not underserved, but like, it's super valuable to serve that bracket, and that's almost what Punk Bag is doing. And I saw that in a bunch of things this E3, and it feels like I kind of get if you don't have friends to play with, or you don't regularly play with people online, it's a bit of a drag. But I think if you, in the situation, for example, I've ended up in, where I have a sort of, diasporic Dota friend group that we don't necessarily all play that much Dota anymore, but like everyone wants to play something. Like these games are perfect. Like I'm actually really looking forward to Sea of Thieves because that's Rare's pirate game.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Which looks great.
Rare again. I know I should know this. But
beloved British developer of sort of
Ratchet and Clank.
No, Banjo Kazooie.
Banjo Kazooie, that.
And loads of things. What else? Diddy Kong Racing.
Mostly console exclusives.
Mostly N64 games.
That's why.
And games that look like N64 games. But yeah. So yeah, and this is the sort of cartoony pirate experience simulator, which mixes sort of like sailing and it's first person, so sailing and PvP and going on adventures on islands and digging things up and that kind of thing. But explicitly not in the context of, I think, like an MMO where you're all logging in every day to level up, but like, let's go on a 2-hour pirate ship adventure kind of thing. Yeah,
I like the idea of me one day playing this. If you ask me to bet on whether I will end up playing it, I'd probably bet no. Just because it seems like it's going to require some organisation and there's going to be 100 other games that also do. But I did, 2 things I really liked in what they showed of it was... you can fire yourself from cannons, which I'm a fan of. And ultimately, this is a game where you can get aboard an enemy ship, which is kind of my thing. And then also, like, during the sea battle, I think I remember noticing this last year now, although I kind of forgot about it until this year. The water in a storm is fucking incredible.
It looks great.
It's like a mountain range that's moving. It's just absolutely spectacular.
It's going to be absolutely massive, I think. I mean, if I was a kid... it would be the greatest.
It's going to YouTube's very well.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
It's one of the reasons that PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is as big as it is because of that factor. I think that's the thing, is it's scoped really nicely. Like I said last week, that I like Battlegrounds because it feels like DayZ at a manageable timescale that focuses on what was actually viable mechanically about DayZ, not the kind of the mad emergent top level stuff that you dream is possible, but the actually what happens in this game level, like practical DayZ. And the more games that kind of strike for that, like, it looks like it can practically achieve the things it wants players to do, and that's very exciting. And I'm just sort of excited to... So I'll put it this way. They're games that would make for great PC gamer diary features. Like, they're games I can't imagine you playing Tom F. unless you were forced to as part of like a mag feature, but I think you would enjoy them. Like,
that's the thing I miss most about games journalism, is being forced to play things that I will ultimately enjoy.
we just did a diary for Battlegrounds last week.
Right.
Exactly.
The next issue.
Yeah.
We'll do one for all of those games. Yeah, it's good.
But you see what I mean, right? Like,
yeah,
sort of like small team goes on an adventure that lasts 2 hours and could probably be written up to about 2,500 words.
Yeah, it's because they generate stories, get like really consistently generate stories, and that's the secret, isn't it? And that's what Player on Battlegrounds does very well. And it looks like Sea of Thieves, like everyone who plays it, even for 20 minutes, comes away with anecdotes. And games as anecdotes generators, my favourite games.
Yeah. So the other part 2 in Pirate Geddon was Skull and Bones, which is by the team at Ubisoft that made the sailing bits in Black Flag. And it is the sailing bits in Black Flag, but as their own game detached from the Assassin's Creed universe. Which actually, if you're going to talk about ways to revisit what was good and bad about Assassin's Creed, breaking off some of the things it did into their own games is actually not a bad idea at all. Because Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, the best things about it were sailing your pirate ship around and playing the pirate game, which had almost nothing to do with the Assassin's Creed game it was trying to also be. And this has a multiplayer focus, so they showed a demo of 2 teams of pirates trying to raid a merchant convoy with basically pirate cops showing up at the end to chase people away. They teased Krakens, why not? But I thought it looked pretty cool. Like, I like naval combat. Like, I mean, this is obviously at a different scale than Sea of Thieves, because it's not like everyone is an individual crew member on one ship. Everyone is a ship. So a little bit like World of Warships, even in that sense. But I think there's a lot of untapped potential in that Age of Sail kind of combat. It looked nice.
Yeah, it looks really pretty.
Is it just naval combat? You don't like get off your boat and go board islands?
I don't think so. I think it looked like what they showed looked like the naval battles from Black Flag, but without the letting go of the wheel and doing Assassin's parkour stuff. I assume that's how it works.
It was often hard to let go of the wheel, and then it was often hard to grab the wheel again when you wanted to. The interaction prompt for that was like context sensitive in some way, and
because it was Assassin's Creed, so they're all
the button needed to do 5 million things.
It looks like as well that it's so there are essentially like 3 kinds of Ubisoft game. There are massive open world, stealthy, shooty assassin things where you have a bow. There are Rabbids games. And there are now relatively sort of moderately scoped, very distinctive multiplayer games, competitive multiplayer games. So Rainbow Six Siege, For Honor, and now this. And it seems to be occupying that category. They mentioned, your actions will have an effect on the world, which could just be For Honor's like campaign map system transplanted into a different form of old-timey warfare.
They said that, and then they just showed like the giant kraken eating a ship.
Yeah.
So is that the consequence? How did I trigger that?
Yeah, exactly. You just piss off a kraken or attract a kraken. It's not really clear what the motivations of that kraken are, to be honest.
It was as someone who's terrified of large undersea creatures, a particularly chilling moment of showing that, because it really was big.
Do you have? Because I have the same thing. Do you have the good fear of large undersea creatures, or the actually bad, this horrible fear of?
I don't like it.
But do you
what's the good
like
fear?
it a bit? Like, so basically, is it like a thrill? Because I have that thing of like, it's terrifying, but like in the good way.
I describe it as like a mixture of awe and fear.
Yeah.
So it's not 100% negative. There's a bit of like, oh my god, look at that thing.
It's sublimity, right? Like
I think when I'm not in the water, there's a sense of awe. If I was in the water, it would be pure terror.
Right. Because I love that shit. Like, I'm not really into like a lot of traditional horror tropes, but big thing under the sea, thumbs up from Chris. So yeah, if they do, it's quite hard to get Kraken right in games. I think I can't think of many games that have done a good like undersea encounter.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, Assassin's Creed Origins, I watched a bit of the live stream after the main presentation, and the undersea encounter he had there. Actually, he was in a lake technically, but it was a hippo, and he had a spear, I guess, and the way. He was swimming, and the hippo was like near enough to pose a threat, I guess. So he went over to attack the hippo, and he's underwater, and he's using a spear basically like a baseball bat, just sort of swinging it and just like whacking the hippo with the end of it. And the hippo is like, they're both underwater, neither of them are moving in a graceful way. It was one of the most surreal fights I've ever seen in a video game. Underwater hippo batting.
But that is obviously true to the ancestors' memories, Tom.
Yeah,
and it's vital that
if you didn't do that, you'd be desynchronized.
Yeah,
so that
exactly.
happened.
Level 30 hippo, which is why it took so many fucking hits.
I mean, just the idea of swinging anything underwater with enough force to really do any damage is kind of absurd.
Thrusting would be perfect.
Let alone a spear. Yeah, you've got a spear. You could.
Did they explain why it's called Origins?
I think it's chronologically the earliest one so far.
Oh yeah, it will be. Yeah. Yeah.
It's that weird thing where like the pyramids are way more ancient than you think. You sort of think of them as like the fun fact thing is that Cleopatra lived closer to the time of the moon landing than the time of the pyramids. And so there's this huge gap in history that it just gets disregarded. It kind of gets all lumped together.
When hippos ruled the earth, no history was recorded.
I was like the fact that a lot of ancient Greek monuments and things like the Acropolis were probably pretty garishly painted. Like there's some good sort of evidence for the kind of pigment that was used to dye the stone and paint the stone in that they would have looked probably very garish from our standards. And no game set in like ancient Greece or any other setting like that ever does anything other than like clean white marble, everyone's in tunics. And I do want to play the game that does like the full fairground Acropolis, like where it's dyed in whatever colors they can get, because that's yeah, a lot of like I think Greek and Roman statues that look beautiful now because all the paint's worn off. Like they've done reconstructions of what they were like when they were painted. They kind of look like garbage. Yeah, suck at the past.
Yeah, screw all of you.
So next on the list of open world games where you stab people, make friends, is Shadow of War. They didn't show loads more of Shadow of War, War.
I'm quite excited about this.
I'm excited. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
Of all of the open world stabby games, it's the one I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw this at its reveal a couple of months ago now. It was right after I'd gone freelance, actually. And spoke to Michael DePlatter about it, who's the guy who was on all of the E3 stages. And I don't think they showed much they hadn't seen apart from an amazing orc called Bruce.
Yeah, how do we feel about Bruce, the Australian
I love
orc?
it. Like, so there's a degree, like, I think at this point, Tolkien is doing like rad kickflips in his grave.
It's too late, isn't it? Too late for him.
Like, he's not spinning in there. They've set up a little half pipe for him. He's doing cool tricks. And that's great because, like, I don't know, like, I think at some point you can either be choked by that license into changing nothing.
Yeah.
Or you can just, like, yeah. I basically was trying to find a place to use the phrase silly Marillion. But, like that's what it is. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather they did what they thought was fun than try and be like ultimately faithful to Tolkien, because there are plenty of other forms of Lord of the Rings media doing that. They can be the mad rock and roll one.
Yeah, it shows them investing in the most interesting system that no one has stolen yet. But in 4 years, every game will have that system, the Nemesis system. And actually making those orcs even more personable, give you more ways to manipulate them, giving you more ways to attack them and assault their castles. And
this one, so Bruce, what we saw was, it's spelled B-R-U-Z, I believe.
Yeah.
But he's very Australian, and so it's hard not to say it Bruce.
Well, he says Bruce as well. So.
We saw a fight against him, which ended with the player sort of mind controlling him, and then he turns to the player's side. And then there are so many really scripted cutscenes after that involving Bruce that I think you probably have to do that. Like, you probably can't kill Bruce. I think that's got to be part of the critical path, is that you have to have Bruce on your side.
It felt like an early critical path mission to me.
Yeah.
Like, which I teach you about the Nemesis system and fortresses.
Yeah. Normally I wouldn't be wild about, but actually I really enjoyed his dialogue and I found it really funny. And there was something about, so I don't know quite what this quality is, whether it's just acting or what, but that from just the first sentence that he says, it's like, oh shit, they've got an actor here. This is an actual performance. This is not someone, particularly in a fantasy game, you just expect everything to be, and the prophecy foretold that we must do this, or we will meet on the battlefield, or, and, you know, Shadow of Mordor certainly has that as well. A lot of those, and maybe that's why it stood out to me actually, is because I remember the dialogue from the Uruks in the first one saying, "Oh, you would have killed me in the last thing, but I've come back for some reason." I think that's an actual quote.
Yeah. I think actually a lot of it's down to animation. Like, they have very good mocap and very good facial animation. This also came across the other trailer they showed, which introduced, I think, it's a female elven assassin, I think, who'll be a main character in one of the expansions, they said, and in the story, and is therefore maybe the 6th female character in Lord of the Rings. That was far more sort of stage fantasy dialogue stuff, but actually quite well performed, and you can see the benefit of the mocap and characters being able to react to each other. And from an acting point of view, I think the reason you kind of immediately get that kind of like, oh, this isn't traditional video game high-end waffle, is... So the skill of voice acting is often like you have to do everything about the context and the feeling behind the line through your voice alone, because you are voicing a cartoon character who moves in probably quite a stiff way, and so everything has to be done through the voice. And so voice acting tends to be like a slightly more over the top register than. It's why, like, when you put a perfect example of this is Sean Bean in Oblivion, who voices Martin as an actor, and his performance is completely appropriate if he was physically there, but it's completely inappropriate and it sounds super dead.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like it's just dying, because some quite naturalistically delivered dialogue is just emanating from this potato.
That's fair.
And you can't, and so it sounds totally wrong. Whereas the same performance with someone who is emoting and doing all the body language things that humans do would probably come across as quite natural. And, because he's not a bad actor. It's just, he delivered a actor performance for what was necessarily a voice actor role. And I think their mocap is getting good enough that an actor can do like small things, or like talk slightly under their breath, or like, you know, I mean, obviously it's not, you can't really talk about physical acting so much when you're talking about like a 10-foot tall orc man, but at the same time there's like
digital performance.
Yeah, the digital performance thing. Like there's little things Bruce does where like some of his like little observations about decapitating people or whatever it is are sort of not under his breath, but you get the kind of realistic impression that it's just sort of an aside.
Yeah.
And that is traditionally quite hard to do if you're also delivering everything super up, because you have to get the, you know, you have to sell everything about the character through only your voice, because your character is essentially a potato.
Yeah, that's a good point. It makes me wonder if, like, I've always just sort of felt like the standard for acting in video games is so wildly low. Just, you know, just even a shitty B movie is sort of better than 90% of games in terms of performance quality. But I think you're probably right that it's largely down to just subtleties of a person's face. Like if you're filming someone, there's a whole load of subtlety that can come across.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Vass in Far Cry 3 was, I feel like, one of the first of digital performances that really worked, where, you know, they've captured enough of the face that it actually looked natural rather than uncanny valley, and added to the performance rather than taking away from it.
Yeah, it's like, it's going to be weird the first couple of times a character expresses something to you in a game just with a look or with a small facial gesture or something like that.
You mean like a
human?
L.A. Noire.
Yeah. I just did the face at Tom, but the lying face.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a, you know, but I guess I think maybe the fact that they're monsters in Lord of the Rings almost helps them a little bit as well, because they can do those things bigger, and it doesn't necessarily have the uncanny valley problem. That said, I was reminded of, I can't remember who done the tweet. I think it was someone related to game journalists, but someone pointed out that the line in I think Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, where the orc leader sieging Helm's Deep says, "Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys," establishes a cosmopolitan lifestyle for orcs, at which point nothing in Shadow of Mordor is off the table, because if he knows what a menu is, then he knows what a restaurant is. That means that at some point after they're birthed in sacks in Isengard, the Uruk-hai are going to having some kind of dining experience that involves selecting things from a menu. So Bruce, the big, he's not an orc, he's the bigger than an orc, smaller than a troll. I don't know. Him, you know, having a kind of cosmopolitan attitude towards people getting decapitated is actually completely in keeping with at least Lord of the Rings movies, if not the books. So, yeah. But it is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. And that is another game that's doing everything. So that has a loot system, that has all these other things.
Yeah.
But I think the sort of the reactive nature of the Nemesis system makes it a lot more promising, because it feels like those things might actually meaningfully, like you said, Tom, play into a story that you then tell someone. You're not going to tell the story of the time you found a bow in Assassin's Creed, right?
No.
Yeah, I remember that.
Someone would be thrown out of that party.
I remember one of the Uruks in Shadow of Mordor had this amazing red headdress, and I really wanted to get him on my side and have him as part of my crew. And I got in a fight with him, and I didn't manage to, you know, possess him or whatever you have to do before you're allowed to possess him. And he basically killed me, except that I had an ability that gives you one last chance to, like, sort of adrenaline kill the person who's about to kill you. And I could have used that. Cheers. But I wanted his headdress. I wanted him on my side because he had a cool hat, so I let him kill me. I was like, I am going to die now, because I'll come back. If I kill him, he's gone forever. Well, potentially.
If you kill him, there's a chance that he comes back, but maybe you'd knocked his hat off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He probably would have had a bag on his head, because that's what happened to most of them. I decapitated them, and they came back with a bag on their head.
Right.
Like, that solves the problem.
I'm really excited about the violence in that game. Honestly, the sword combat was really satisfying in the first game, and it looks like it's going to be equally hyper violent. Executions.
There is something a little bit unsettling about the whole mind control thing. You do sort of, you really kind of violate them in a way that's not, I'm not 100% comfortable with. I know they'd never ever do this, but I feel like you could solve all of my problems with that game if you just were an orc. The reason you're taking control of orcs is because you are an orc, and the reason you're vying for power against other orc chieftains is because you are an orc chieftain.
Yeah, it's slightly in keeping with Tolkien fiction a little bit, because elves are very much not like the good guys really in that fiction, and it's you're being possessed by this elf, and the elf has all those powers and instructs you to use them, and the human is almost a vessel for it. So maybe that is, I mean, obviously relatively.
For some reason, my brain just went, so much for the tolerant elf. Says
All
it
the orcs should say.
recently.
And mod that in.
It's like the drawback of using your ghost elf powers is when you kill them, they say, so much for the tolerant elf.
Excellent. That's going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. When on that note, actually, they did say, or at least he might have said this. It might have been during the briefing when I saw the game, or when I was speaking to him, that they are sort of, because they're going to have Sauron in this game, like rather than just be a presence, he's going to be more of a deal, and you are becoming like the Bright Lord, but as specifically opposed to his Dark Lord. And the implicit idea is maybe it's good to be no kind of Lord, which is despite the hugely over the top nature of the game, actually is a very Lord of the Rings appropriate theme, because the whole point of Lord of the Rings is that the only people capable of wielding power are these humble little hobbits, who are ultimately the only people who can be trusted with it. Like, men can't be trusted with it, elves can't be trusted with it, even sort of like godlike beings like Gandalf can't be trusted with it, and that, it's ultimately about, sort of small scale heroism from the people in the middle. So weirdly, having you play as sort of the ultimate magic man, possessed by the ghost of an elf, mind controlling orcs and building this huge army, doesn't undermine the actual kind of story of Lord of the Rings that much, because the whole reason that it's Frodo who's capable of doing this thing and that no one else can is because he's not the most powerful person in the world. So, I mean, obviously that doesn't necessarily get off the hook completely, but I don't think it's as far gone as you'd think.
No, I mean, the arc of the first game was clearly leading to supplanting Sauron and probably replacing him as an equally dickish overlord.
Equally
killed
shitty
millions
lord.
by that point. Yeah.
Next on the list, and this is, I don't know how we're going to do this segue, XCOM 2, War of the Chosen. So we mentioned this next week.
Got the word war in it.
Yeah, Shadow of War of the Chosen. So this is the freshly announced XCOM 2 expansion. According to Jake Solomon, the biggest expansion they've ever, bigger than previous expansions. I assume he meant bigger than things like Enemy Within, not bigger than the previous DLC packs they've done for XCOM 2. But
Yeah, because Enemy Within was a legit expansion.
Yeah. So this introduces sort of like persistent kind of nemesis, I guess, like special aliens that you'll fight multiple times that have sort of special traits and things and get more powerful, as well as multiple different human factions that can all, or at least ally factions that can be sort of recruited and give you loads of new bonuses.
Yeah. And so they haven't really, I feel like they haven't done sort of villain characters much before. Because so I have the Alien Hunters DLC and I started the mission for it, but I haven't got anywhere with it. I can't remember if something went wrong, but for some reason that was the point I stopped playing my latest campaign. Were they individual specific characters, or was it like a type of super alien?
I think they were more like boss fights than that, whereas in this they're huge characters who can seriously affect your campaign if they're not dealt with. And
so in this you fight them, but even if you defeat them, they're not like dead. They just sort of go away and then they come back later. Is that right?
Yeah. So they dog you throughout the campaign, and they're ultimately out to destroy XCOM, but they're actually after knowledge. And the way they get knowledge is often by like pinning down your troops and extracting knowledge from them, or actually just kidnapping them from the battlefield. And you can rescue them afterwards, but they can just straight up steal soldiers. And sometimes they'll kind of just attack you directly. Sometimes they'll show up in missions when you don't expect, and sometimes they'll hunt you down, use a massive gun to blow your ship out of the sky. Then you have like an all or nothing fight where the Chosen come and try and finish you off for good, and that's a game over to them if you fail that.
Something like that already happens in XCOM 2, doesn't it? But...
Yeah, it's a variation on that, but apparently they come at you with the big gun as well. And each of the Chosen, which is what the Nemesis is called, have a kind of corresponding ally faction who are their kind of antagonists. So you can befriend these allied factions, and the more you get to know them, the more power you get. You get to hire their soldiers, who are fucking amazing. So there's loads of bonuses for making friends with them, and they'll give you kind of strategic orders, which are like policies in Civilization, which let you stack up effects that could benefit you in battles. So, for example, one might be the turn timer for a stealth mission doesn't start until you're spotted.
Oh, okay.
It's that sort of thing. Or it could be a modifier on the strategic layer that reduces the advent countdown by one every turn.
The advent calendar.
Is that what it's called? What's it called?
It's the advent calendar.
The advent calendar. The
bad-
project.
the
I can't
final
remember
chocolate
The big bad
sort
project. The evil advent calendar of doom.
The final chocolate is conquest.
So as you befriend these factions, they give you ways of hunting the chosen. So it's kind of cat and mouse across the strategic map.
So I can't remember the first two human factions that they talked about, but the third one was defectors, basically. So they're like alien soldiers who've decided, actually, no, this is wrong. We should not do this. And the I can't remember if it was an image or a video, but the thing I saw of them, like you could, they're wearing the full Advent armor, but also you can kind of see their like fingers underneath it, and they've got like talons, and so they've been physically altered by the process. But I really like that idea of having some Advent soldiers on your side.
Yeah, and so all of the factions have their own kind of aesthetic and their own deal, basically, and very themed upgrades that you can get off them. And so you can have those guys in your squad if you befriend them, and they're like insanely fast. They're just human-alien hybrids who can do like loads of actions every turn.
Awesome.
And the idea is that at the top level, they earn like ability points, and they can unlock just almost game-breaking abilities. So, for example, I think there's a sniper one who, if you've got enough points, can just empty their entire clip in one shot. So if you've got like an upgrade on like an insane gun that you have, they'll just fire all of them at one target. The other awesome thing, there's so much they've added, it's crazy. The other awesome thing they've done is they've added bonds between fighters.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
All I want is Fire Emblem, but inside XCOM.
This is actually, our friend John Roberts tweeted a screenshot of a quote about that, just saying, "Well, XCOM's the best game ever."
I was talked to Jake Solomon like a couple of hours ago about this, actually, and that was like one of my first questions. It's quite hard to ask Jake Solomon a question because he's the most enthusiastic man about XCOM ever, and he'll just tell you everything about the game before you even ask a question, which is brilliant. And he explained it as so. Almost like, when your guys level up and you don't know their specialty yet, and then suddenly they'll have an experience, they'll get to the end of a mission, you'll know they're a sniper or whatever. Suddenly kind of compatibilities will pop up as people fight together. And if you work on those compatibilities, they'll become battle bonds. And these come with like abilities that you can use on the strategic layer and in the fighting layer as well. So on the strategy layer, if you send like a couple of battle bros into like a stealth mission, the covert missions where you kind of like put them somewhere on the map for a few turns, they'll get it done like twice as fast because they work so well together.
Is it implied that they are banging?
Jake said that it's whatever the player wants to think.
Okay. So, yes.
So you get to make your own stories with that.
Triple XCOM.
On the battlefield, they get to do cool stuff like
High five.
That would be amazing. Someone should mod that in.
Bang.
Bang.
They can like both shoot a target at exactly the same time to do like cool. Even the idea of this is badass. So,
Let's shoot him, bro.
Like,
yeah, bro.
Can they stand back to back
I don't know.
and shoot in different directions?
I hope so.
Can one of them throw a shotgun to
Have
the other one in
catch
slow
it.
motion
And he cocks it as he
and then a
catches
helicopter goes over in like really, really slow motion.
and then the Top Gun soundtrack plays.
Yeah.
To be confirmed, I would say. They can like revive each other, and if there are new panic states and stuff like that, and if one of them makes it to another one and they're panicked, they can like get rid of that and slap them on the back and say it's okay, get up and fight.
It is I, your friend. We are banging. Remember?
So that's awesome, and it's something that I think almost everyone who's played XCOM has thought about.
Yeah. I've just fully like fictionalized those relationships.
Yeah.
I just made them in my head.
You end up shipping members of your
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I said to Jake Solomon, like, people have been doing this in their heads for 3 years now. It's kind of cool that you're finally giving people the.
So is there did he say if there was if one of them dies, does that like?
Oh, that's a good question. I should ask that.
Does that like fuck them up? Because presumably that would be the downside. Is that like if one of them goes, then the other one just like
because they do have a state of shaken, don't they? Where it like lasts between missions. Where
it's interesting. I don't know about that specifically, but your soldiers can get tired now. And
sick of this shit.
I feel this.
If they go on a few missions in a row, they get tired. And you can still send them into a fight where they're tired, but they can come out with some negative effects. And one of them, the example he gave me was obsessive, where if that soldier in future fights has no ammo in his gun, his first action might be to just reload it. And it's that sort of thing. It's like character flaw little things that happen occasionally and might sort of slightly screw you over if you're not careful.
I love the idea of adding like Sims-style ticks to characters. The more of that stuff they can add, the better, to be honest.
I liked, so shaken happens when you are, if a soldier, I think it's if they get critically wounded or like take a lot of damage or something. I think it's just they took a lot of damage at the end of the mission. They get shaken, and then they will sort of get their groove back if you take them on a mission and you succeed in the mission and they don't get injured, which is not too hard to do usually. And I like that system, but I always kind of wanted it to be a little bit finer grained. I want it to be like, if this person was like mauled by a chrysalid, they should, every time a chrysalid comes near them, there's a chance they're going to panic because they're chrysalid phobic now. They just can't deal with it. They're just like flashbacks to their horrible injury.
Yeah, I always like it when those go both ways, which is what happens when people panic in XCOM 2 as well. There's a chance they'll just hunker down, but there's a chance they'll take a shot that could just, crit chrysalid's death.
Yeah, or kill one of your own people.
Yeah. Which is satisfying and irritating.
It is. Yeah, it's always cool when they, their panic action is to fire and their shot kills the alien, and then you're like, you should panic more often. We should just scare this guy randomly.
Boo! Ah!
The other awesome thing they've done is they've added loads and loads of text and speech to the game in the strategic layer. So the chosen Nemesis aliens will taunt you constantly over the comms as you're kind of like looking at the map. And they'll refer to earlier missions and things you've done.
Remember the airfield, Fisher?
In the kind of the ship on the way back, you'll now hear Advent news reports spinning what you've just done in the field, that kind of thing. And
awesome. They call them terrorist attacks and stuff.
Yeah, and it's kind of comment as in this country, the evil, terrorists hit this target, that kind of thing. And
one of them shot his gun in the air, and then they all ran away.
In the kind of the rec room, I don't know what you call it, the one with the bar.
Yeah, it's just a memorial place, really.
Yeah, so if you zoom in on that on the expansion, there's like a whole radio DJ there. There's like loads of kind of jokes and stuff happening. It's all this sort of stuff. They've
Three Dog.
They've touched almost every aspect of the game.
I think what I want is like XCOM 2 Citadel, where it's just like the party all the time. Yeah.
And whenever they add that sort of stuff and add that functionality, it also gives modders a hook to just add more of that sort of thing, which is a really exciting thing about XCOM 2 as well, because it's built to be moddable in lots of ways. So I'm really excited about it. It says it's almost everything they've added, every aspect of the game they've added to. Like
that sounds great.
New weapons and insane new classes.
Now. I actually want to finish my Long War playthrough so that I'm not sick of XCOM by the time this comes out.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Fantastic. You mentioned covert missions where you have to put soldiers in for a few turns.
Yeah, I think there are like infiltration bits, sections. And
was that in XCOM 2?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't remember it. Because I remember hearing about the Long War where you have to infiltrate people, and that's like a multiple turn thing.
So there are... that's a good question, because that stuff is in Enemy Within as well. Unless they're just adding that stuff.
Yeah, I remember maybe in Enemy Within where you have missions where you can only send one guy and he only has a pistol, and that was like a special covert thing.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be more like that. I think prison break scenarios for all the dudes that those chosen to kidnap, that sort of thing. Specialist missions.
Which is very Invisible Ink, actually.
Good point, actually. Those systems
which would be an amazing thing for them to learn from. Like, if they were going to...
I feel like, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like I've heard Jake Sullivan talk about that game. He's definitely like the kind of person who plays other stuff and actually pays attention to it.
Yeah.
There are some game designers who are just kind of like up in their own world, and they just want to do...
You mentioned that actually one of the things that gave them the idea for The Chosen was actually Shadow of Mordor. And
that was our segue, Tom.
Yeah,
we had it.
Oh man, I've been doing this podcasting for so long and still so bad at that.
The disparity between how highly podcasters rate the importance of segues and how highly the listeners rate segues is startling.
Well,
I've never listened to a podcast and been like, this topic didn't relate to the last one at all. What the hell?
I tell you what, though, I did multiple times during this E3 struggle to reconcile the previous topic with the new one, such as when Shadow of War, which you just mentioned, segue into Life is Strange. That's a fucking segue.
Nice. Good.
Life is Strange Before the Storm got announced at this E3, which is not the one that Don't Nod are making. That's the interesting thing.
Oh,
this
right.
is two lots of new Life is Strange.
Life is so strange. You need many things to explore.
Yeah.
Its weirdness.
So this is a prequel to Life is Strange, where it looks like you play as Chloe, and it features Rachel, which is Rachel, right? The one that is not in.
That
Life
sounds
is Strange.
right. I heard people talking about that. I've not played Life is Strange beyond the first.
Oh, have neither of you
half an
played
hour.
Life is Strange?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, this will be a short bit then.
So there's something. Well, Life is Strange was a game that was. I didn't feel like it had like a huge. It wasn't like a huge hit on release, but it's just ever since then I have not stopped hearing about it. Ever since.
Like, and I think my way of encountering it was probably representative of that, which is that like Pip had played it and just kind of wanted to watch me play it, and so I played all of it over the course of a bunch of sessions. It's 5 episodes, and it's great. Like it's I think there's a reason that it's sort of gained this sort of quiet fandom, but also kind of a degree of awareness that maybe other games of a similar kind wouldn't. Like, it's really well executed. It's really sort of charming and sweet and sad and human, and just kind of worth the time it takes to get through the 5 episodes. Actually, like,
so something interesting about this new one is my friend Ashley actually played Chloe in the original, and she's not playing Chloe in this one because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. Am I saying that right?
Huh.
There's a bunch of acronyms. So she couldn't work on it, and so someone else was playing Chloe, but she is a consultant on it, so she's sort of like giving input on Chloe.
That might work, and this is it'll be interesting to see what they do, because they've set themselves up with some potential things. Like, so when Life is Strange first sort of came around, I'm on the edge of a sneeze, so apologies.
Like the Edge of Tomorrow's sequel no one wanted.
It's just Tom Cruise sneezing over and over and over again. So, a lot of that game, it's sort of like its back of the box features is kind of like Max's time power. The fact that she can rewind time to do conversations different ways, which is a really cool idea in a game about exploring conversation trees to actually have it be part of the story. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for that to exist in this game. I almost don't think now it needs it. Weirdly, like, that whole sort of side of it, the fact that it's called Before the Storm, is, again, important if you played the original game. So, like, I think it has the potential to be like the firewalk with me to Life is Strange Twin Peaks, because Life is Strange borrows a lot from Twin Peaks generally. And it also hinges, like Twin Peaks, off sort of events that happen off screen prior to the game. And this is explicitly about those events by the looks of the trailer they announced. So I think, weirdly, like, the first game's sort of like sci-fi layer could be completely stripped away, and you could make an adventure game just about the human characters that are involved if they choose to not do any of the time travel stuff. And it would work really well. It's genuinely exciting. Like, I would recommend anyone go and play Life is Strange who's missed it, because this is the way it spreads. Like, it takes a bit of getting used to, and but I think not because, like we were saying earlier about performances being very different to what you're used to in games, Life is Strange's writing is very different to what you're used to in games, because it is like American teen drama writing, really.
Everything is hella.
Everything is hella something, and like with a mystery layer above that.
I think I would have a newfound tolerance for some of the quirks of that since living in America for 3 months recently, and I was just in an elevator, and there were 2 girls talking about, I think, music, and one of them literally said, and I was just like, whatever. And it was just a line that I've only ever heard in jest before. Yeah. And it was just, these are real people literally saying that. That is just real.
Elevator.
That is authentic.
Yeah, well, like, it's unusually ungame-like in the way that teenagers talk to each other in it. And, yeah, it's great. I imagine so many people played it now that's preaching to the choir, but not much was revealed of this kind of like prequel stuff, but it's cool because, you can just keep telling stories in that setting, and it keeps being interesting because, as Telltale spin out into doing more and more stuff in more and more sort of outlandish settings and taking on licenses that maybe aren't a good fit for that kind of walk around, make choices, talk to people, solve a puzzle, adventure stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy, which they're doing at the moment. Life is Strange is good for being focused in on just kind of interpersonal stuff. And yeah. Speaking of interpersonal stuff set in the Pacific Northwest, but not really, Tacoma is out in August, which is cool news. There was not a lot of it at E3, but I'm actually really excited to see what they have done now.
I have literally, I haven't played it at all, and I haven't really followed it that closely, except just a sort of the odd trailer. So I feel very unspoiled in it, which is good. I really want to go into it fresh, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they can do, particularly because they found a way with holograms of putting characters in in that game, which is an interesting, that's something that's, I think, hit a load of different, I really don't want to say walking simulator.
The floating simulator.
It's floating simulators at the same time.
Funny enough, Prey has sort of, I feel like, covered some of the ground that I imagine Tacoma is going to cover, where it's this space station where there is a story and you're uncovering it in retrospect. And it's really interesting that System Shock 2, I don't know about System Shock 1, but certainly System Shock 2 was a thing that really wanted a human story and wanted a story about humans. And there's acted dialogue in audio diaries, and it does a really good job of telling these stories, but it can never have you meet a human, and it's desperate to avoid that, and it goes to crazy lengths to avoid that, to the point where the closest you ever get is you're just about to find these two people you've been reading about or hearing about in audio diaries for the whole game, and there's a door closes between you and you see them rush off, and that's the closest you ever get to a human.
Speak to me through this letterbox.
Yeah. And then Bioshock does a similar thing where the only humans you find are behind invincible glass and all that stuff. And then Prey just was no, we just got humans. They're just there. You can kill them if you like. They'll talk to you if you don't. And we've just...
like real humans.
Yeah. I found that with a lot of my friends. And yeah, it was kind of weird to find that actually, I guess that isn't... I mean, it doesn't 100% hold up. There are problems with it, but it doesn't... I didn't get the impression that they spent 90% of their development time on that, but it did work. They were just hanging around, and they would say things that weren't totally out of character, and it wasn't totally weird, and I could shoot them at any time, which I didn't. Then that's usually the thing of oh shit, if the person's important to the plot, then you can't kill them, because then we've got to figure out how the plot goes from there. And Prey struck some kind of interesting balance between that. And so Tacoma... builds on Gone Home's thing of walking around an environment and discovering it through audio diaries, except that you see people walking around, I think, as you hear the audio diary, so you sort of see the performance, but it is a hologram recreation of what happened on the station, so you can't interact with it, that's how they get around the sort of central problem that people have been avoiding for years of humans you can interact with. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting that Prey has popped up in the middle and sort of not had to avoid the problem as much as other games, and hasn't really fallen foul of it. We talked about there's a quest in Prey that really does completely fuck up in almost every way
because of exactly that thing.
Yeah, but they could just cut that quest, and I think that you would say that game handled NPCs pretty well.
So there's no segue here. Cuphead is coming out on PC in September.
Well, hang on, Prey, you can turn into a mug.
I don't know. You're right, though. That would have been a better segue.
I don't know what the segue sounds like, but...
So...
Yeah, I didn't know this was coming to PC until we just saw it on PCGamer.com.
So presumably it's coming to PC.
We're
Tom?
right about that. I'm not sure.
Blame Tom if we're wrong.
I'm not sure I've read that news story.
I'm mostly aware of Cuphead at the moment because of people, specifically Crit and Crowbar regular Scoo, shouting it at Paul from Mode 7. And I don't know why.
Okay.
So this is me receiving half of a joke, but not the other half. But Cuphead, beyond that... Sorry, Tom, you were saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, I have a few friends who... a few friends who are just wildly excited about Cuphead, like it's the most exciting game in the world to them, and I think they're all animators.
Which is for good reason, because Cuphead is the 2D platformer game that looks like a cartoon from the 30s.
Yeah, now that we say this. I remember we have talked about it on the podcast before, so maybe we at least thought
maybe it was
could
announced
be on
to PC or something. Yeah. Maybe
the thing I remember us
saying.
saying is that it's like those cartoons from the days when cartoons were racist.
Yeah.
We just hope it's not racist.
Well, so it seems like they have made... I've seen that discussion around Cuphead enough that I presume someone has responded to it.
They've got to see this coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Surely.
There is a problem.
This is the easiest trap in the world to avoid.
Yeah. So we'll see. But
I don't think there are even really people in it, are there? Like, it's all totally abstract.
Well, I mean...
You're a cup-headed person.
That's true. Yeah, so like I think it seems to be avoiding being racist in exactly that manner. The trailer that they put out for E3 has some just incredible fucking animation in it.
Yeah.
Like you're fighting a big Medusa squid lady. Looks nice. It's a lot easier for us to just simply link the trailer in the show notes and let you experience what this actually looks like than attempt to describe it.
I heard that it is actually all hand-drawn. Like, they literally draw it on paper and scan it in.
That's amazing. That seems really hard to do. Should probably be the tagline for the game.
This was fucking hard. Please buy it.
Let's see, we're getting towards the end of the list. Awesome. A big list of E3 things. So other things that were announced at E3 that just I wasn't expecting: Metro Exodus.
Yeah.
So Metro 2033 is one of my favourite single-player shooters ever.
Is that the most recent one?
No, Metro Last Light was the most recent one.
But 2033 is better?
I think...
So there's a Redux version of it, which...
Metro Redux is 2033. So, like... That is the one that I would recommend people play first, partly because it's the start of the story, obviously, but it's the one that's got the sort of occupies the sort of fondest place in my heart, I think. Last Light is a sequel to a game that already knew it was good, whereas 2033 is the game that kind of set up to do things slightly differently. And so the key to the Metro games is they are the middle ground between BioShock and Stalker. Without the kind of slightly OTT kind of pretentiousness of the Shock games, but without the kind of lack of focus of Stalker. So, like, I love Russian science fiction. That's sort of one of, like, and I've always really admired, like, very drab takes on the apocalypse, where things are very simple and practical and kind of right there in front of you, which is what Stalker always did very well. It's like being based on like Roadside Picnic. Stalker was always about the idea that like an alien could briefly visit your backyard and leave it a radioactive wasteland for 1,000 years that makes people mental. And Metro is set in a world where there has been a nuclear apocalypse and you've got to sort of climb out of the subway system, hence it being called Metro, yourself with sort of shonky handmade nail guns and shotguns and sort of bolt guns and things that all have a sort of tremendous sense of physicality.
The Handmade Nail Gun's Tale.
Yeah.
It's my ultimate title for this game.
That's Jesus, that is an amazing compound pun. Yes, basically that. And that first game, like that Metro 2033 was one of the first games that made me want to write about games. Like legitimately, like because the way it feels physically and the way that ties into sort of how lost and isolated you feel, kind of like just surviving within this environment, is brilliant. Like you have a gun that is pneumatic and therefore has to be pumped, so you don't reload it, you have to pump it, and there's something kind of brilliantly sort of like analog and physical about that you don't get out of a normal reload animation. The sensation of like panic pumping a gun in the middle of a fight is, I don't know, it's a mixture of like feel and like level design and art direction and stuff that creates a really convincing sense of like survival against the odds in a relatively traditional kind of nuclear apocalypse, but at a sort of with a degree of kind of like both creative fidelity and sort of sobriety that other games like this don't hit. Like Fallout also sits somewhere to the side of Metro in terms of the map of, you know, post-nuclear apocalypse games.
Not being very familiar with Metro games. For most of this trailer, again, it was a cold open. I thought it might be a Fallout game. I thought it was like, they're. I mean, it'd be weird, I guess, that it wasn't part of Bethesda.
Yeah, like
show.
like Russian Fallout would be one way to think about it. Like, it's a lot more sedate. Like, it's a lot more kind of like, oh well, shit, you've been kidnapped by a gargoyle. That sucks. Anyway, back to playing cards. Like, Last Light was a little more spectacular in some ways, a little bit sort of bigger in its kind of ambitions, and I really love Last Light for that. So I'm basically just excited that they're making a new one.
Yeah,
essentially.
This video was first person and sort of looked like gameplay at first, and then as it went on, it became increasingly clear that it was not real gameplay in that very special way where it's kind of it's what a developer would like the gameplay to be, and it feels. It's obviously what they showed to the public, but it also feels like what they would show to executives, because it uses custom animations to sell particular moments in a way that if you've played a lot of games, you know from long experience, these are never in the final thing. This is like the thing they do in the sort of previs or the proof of concept that in practice they can't make work in every situation, and so is not actually part of the game. And it was... they weren't really sort of claiming it was in-game, really, so it wasn't like a deception or anything, but it was just funny to watch it and think, oh yeah, he's playing a game, and like, oh no, there's a custom stamping animation here, so that's not going to happen.
It's open world, is it?
Looked open-ish. I mean, yeah, it just looked like Fallout to me.
Quite a shift, because one of the things I love about the series is how claustrophobic it is and how it plays with space. It kind of puts you to open areas and then closes you back in again.
Yeah, I mean, this video started in a very narrow tunnel and then emerged out into a Fallout-type wasteland, and so that made a big deal of that. So I assume that's how the game works.
Still part of it.
Maybe. I mean, that sort of does happen in both Metro games, where you go outside briefly, but...
There's a lot of drama attached to that, though. Like, it's
gas mask management.
Gas masks on, and kind of they do an amazing job of kind of making the gas masks a really vivid texture in front of your face that can get blood and splatter and rain and shit on it. It's really good.
It was actually part of what made me think it might be a Fallout thing was just that it's a Bethesda cliche to start in an enclosed dark space and then emerge out and have this one moment of like, oh shit, it's a huge world.
We'll see then. Also, in terms of big open world where things have gone wrong, don't know why I'm committing so hard to the segue thing, State of Decay 2 was announced. And there were a lot of zombie games at this E3, not a lot of them PC-focused, because zombie games will never die, appropriately enough.
Actually, the XCOM 2 thing had zombies in it.
Yes, it did. Oh yeah, we forgot to mention XCOM zombies. Let's talk about XCOM zombies.
Attack aliens and you.
Indeed.
They do.
That's... I saw zombies and I was like, oh god, really, zombies? But then hearing that they're like a third thing that will attack both
they're
of you
neutral zombies.
Yeah, that makes it mechanically interesting, at least.
I think it sounds like it's going to be tied to Lost Cities in particular. So it's almost like a terrain type. And if you happen to battle there, then you're going to have to also fight these waves and waves and waves of zombies.
So State of Decay was the zombie survival game about like building up a group of survivors and building up a safe house.
Oh yeah, I remember it now.
And it's getting a sequel where you do those things. I don't really have a huge opinion on this, except to say that there's in the reveal at E3, this made me laugh a lot. In the reveal, it shows it's a bit heavy-handed, and it's not a great trailer because no one's mouth moves while they're doing dialogue, which is not an amazing look in 2017. However, it shows a sort of male survivor, obviously the player character, kind of leading people and so on, and recruiting followers, and obviously it's trying to set up the kind of dynamic event that presumably will happen in the game as it works. I mean, kudos to State of Decay. It is trying sort of Nemesis system-esque kind of meaning for your decisions. At one point he decides to save a particular follower rather than let her succumb to the zombie plague. He uses his last antidote on her. And then late in the trailer, he is very gruesomely ripped in half by a boomer from Left 4 Dead or a big zombie, depending on which side of the IP you're on. and suddenly the player character becomes the lady he saved earlier.
Yeah, right.
And the idea that you'll sort of switch between people based on the party, and she kills the big zombie and moves off.
So whenever you save someone, it's just like a one-up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Presumably. The best thing about this was I was watching this on Twitch with chat on for some reason, and among the swastikas and everything else, scrolling past was one guy saying, as the man got ripped in half and was replaced by the woman he'd saved earlier, this is such fucking SJW pandering.
Really?
Yeah. It was amazing. It sold me on the game immediately.
My favorite thing about that was woman gets bit by zombie, and then the dude uses his last syringe to save her, saying, "Oh, we need everyone we have," or whatever. And then when he dies, there's a voiceover thing saying, "And no one gets a second chance." It's like, you just showed someone getting a second chance. That's literally what happened.
You don't get a second chance if you're ripped in half.
No, I mean, if they'd said that, sure.
You get a second chance if you're bitten a bit, but you don't get a second chance if anything has fallen off.
Yeah.
State of Decay 2.
I didn't play State of Decay 1. I actually heard really good things about it, but watching this trailer, again, cold open, didn't know what it was, and I was just like, this could be anything. There is no zombie game that if you incremented the number at the end of it, I would not believe you if you told me this was it.
Yeah.
If you told me it was Left 4 Dead 3, I believe you. If you told me it was, I don't know, Killing Floor 3, I would believe you. If you told me it was Walking Dead, I would believe you.
Almost as if it's a little overplayed.
Yeah, there's some overlap.
So, speaking of things that we're not going to have anything to say about, Forza's coming to the PC. Cars!
Good for the people who like the games
I
about
put this
those
on the
things.
list, and now I don't know why.
It's probably one of the prettiest and biggest racing series in the world, as far as I know. You can tell how little I know about it.
It's prettiest, biggest, it's the carsiest,
Prettiest, biggest, bestest.
Forziest.
So it's worth mentioning.
They had a car on stage at E3, I noticed that.
They always do.
I'm a sharp observer.
There was a car there.
It was to prove how powerful the Xbox One was by having a car on stage and saying, look, that's also powerful.
The Xbox One X, I think you mean.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The Xbox.
Xbox. It recurs. So it's Xbox One X, and then the next one will be Xbox One Xbox One.
Yeah.
There's a finite number of sounds they can make.
God, I just realised they're going to do an Xbox Zero at some point, aren't they? They're just going to go backwards.
Or, confusingly, Xbox 2.
Or it'll be
Which will
Xbox
be Xbox
Zero,
4.
but instead of a Z, it'll be an X.
Xbox 2 Origins.
Oh, God. There's nothing they wouldn't do. That's the problem. Like,
It's
there's
true.
no joke
They
you can
can't be
make
stopped.
that
They
might
can't
not
be
come
It's
true.
can't be
it's honest to God, the worst branding on planet Earth.
I mean, just apart from anything else, and just from a sheer practicality point of view, the other one is called the Xbox One S, which is phonetically almost identical to the Xbox
I
One
wondered if
S.
they were going for like phone naming, like iPhone S, right? Like,
Right.
but don't know. So this is a weird thing to come to mind, but I remember once upon a time when I was a teenager and distraught that the Dreamcast hadn't been successful, because I was a Dreamcast early adopter for a teenager, and obviously the PlayStation thing. I remember my dad, who has no interest in games whatsoever, sitting me down and very sagely explaining that PlayStation is a brilliant name for a console and will inevitably sell loads because it sounds exciting and it sounds kind of futuristic in a way that Dreamcast simply doesn't. And he was right. He has no interest in games whatsoever, but on this particular point of branding, he was 100% correct. And every time Microsoft struggle to name a new Xbox, after Xbox 360 inexplicably worked. I think back to that message. Like, Xbox was never a good name for a console.
I haven't really recovered from Xbox One. I'm still in shock.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, I was at the. I must have told the story before. I was at the
You just
Bethesda
went one
pre-E3 event.
One.
I was at the Bethesda E3 event pre-E3 event when they announced that, surrounded by games journalists, and the ripple of befuddlement and people like when whoever it was at the time, Don Matrick, said, and it is called the Xbox One, and as far as I could tell, like half the games journalists in Britain just laughed out loud. Like, how did they end up there?
There's the Nintendo Wii, though. Let's never forget.
Yeah, that's true. Switch, brilliant name.
Switch is great.
Yeah.
Good. That's consoles.
Anyway, that is console. Sorry.
We know so little about
right.
cars. We've dived into console chat.
There are cars in it. It's coming to PC.
It's going to look real nice.
Vroom. That's how cars go.
Indeed.
Next, and finally, it's A Way Out. Pointedly put at the end of the list.
This, so it's from the Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons guy. He was presented as a guy on stage, more than the studio. And it is a split-screen co-op game about two people breaking out of prison. It is, I'm not totally sure, but like, it sort of just has this Uncharted or sort of Naughty Dog vibe about it. And the most recent Uncharted game involved you breaking out of a prison with your brother in a way that was, you cooperated and you did all these things. And it just, I don't know, so much of the aesthetic and so much of the theming of it is so similar to that I kind of I almost couldn't really see past that. It was just like, if there had never been an Uncharted game about breaking out of prison and there had never been an Uncharted game with a brother, I don't think you actually are brothers in this game, but this is the studio who made Brothers, and it is about two men cooperating with each other. Even if that had never happened, you'd still be thinking, wow, Uncharted. And then there was literally an Uncharted game where you do this exact thing. And it's not split-screen co-op in Uncharted, but it's still... I couldn't get past that. It's also... So it's split-screen co-op, and it's... I don't know, I feel like I was a lot less taken with this than a lot of people were. Split-screen co-op, I guess, is just a really crowd-pleasing feature that a lot of people want and don't get usually. And this is... I was going to say exclusively split-screen co-op. You can play it online, but even when you play it online, it will still be split-screen, because I think the whole game is designed around you being able to see what the other person's perspective is. And they do a bunch of like very custom cinematic things with it, where one of you can be in a cutscene, the other one can be playing the game while that cutscene is happening. And I imagine there's going to be a whole load of cutscenes where, you are going to see part of the cutscene from one person's perspective and part of the cutscene from the other person's perspective, and that will be used to dramatic effect, which certainly has a lot of potential. But yeah, it kind of struck me as, I'm sure it's going to have a whole bunch of, kind of like Brothers. Brothers was a game where you control two people, and it was single player, but it was a series of sort of vignettes where, in this situation, you must do this, and here's the mechanic, and then a bunch of cutscenes. And I get the impression this is going to be that as well. It'll just be like, here's how you have to cooperate in this scene, and then we move on from that. I don't know why I'm being dismissive about that, because I like Brothers. But for some reason, this didn't really excite me. It's just that, but in a prison is just much less exciting. What will be really interesting, actually, is to see if they have anything that comes remotely close to the crowning moment of Brothers, which is a spoiler to explain in any detail, but just a way that the controls and the narrative match up in a way that was beautiful and brilliant. And only just recently did any other game come close to that, with Edith Finch. Had a not really an equivalent moment, but just a similar thing where controls and story aligned in a really nice way.
And that is all of the E3 that we have on the E3 list.
What do we think of E3? Good? Bad?
I actually get very pretty excited. But I guess my sort of, my game of the show would probably be the Dishonored expansion, which is, for it to be an expansion is maybe not a great sign, but Dishonored 2 is so good, and I love Dishonored 1 as well, and the fact that Dishonored 2 is better gives me a huge amount of faith that when they set out to make something that adds on to that, it will just be better. They'll just make it brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's really rare, actually. There are loads of games I love. There are very few studios who just make better games again and again. And I would say, I don't think Prey is better than Dishonored 2. I think Dishonored 2 is better. But that was obviously a different team within the same studio. And Prey is also really, really good in its own way. So the whole studio is brilliant. And specifically the Dishonored 2 team is especially brilliant.
I agree with Tom. Tom?
My game of E3 was Wolfenstein, for the reasons expressed.
I think Shadow of War is the other one that I'm 100%, well, not 100% sure, but like 90% sure I'm going to love.
Yeah.
And so in terms of how excited I am about it, that's really high. In terms of what we saw, I liked what we saw. But it wasn't like mind-blowing. It wasn't like because we already knew about this game. The reasons I think it's going to be good are strongly grounded in how good the last game was.
It's kind of a testament to the fact that like Bethesda are on a fucking roll at the moment.
Yeah,
like not obviously Shadow of War isn't a Bethesda game, but man, if they just keep giving really talented first-person game developers the budget and the freedom to do what the fuck they want, then that is a good thing.
Although that their conference had a pretty negative reaction from the public at large, I think, because a lot of people were hoping for a new Fallout or Elder Scrolls and they didn't get it. And then they also sort of re-announced paid mods, which is always I was going to say a controversial topic. It's almost universally a negative topic. Like people just hate it for reasons that kind of surprise me a little bit. I'm not surprised that some people don't like it, but I'm surprised that it seems like no one likes it. I would have thought there would be more people saying, oh, this is cool because if people can get paid for what they make, they'll make cooler things. They'll make more in-depth things.
But what they will make is PC Gamer back pages from 5 years ago.
Yes. So, I did a sort of double take watching this because they show a bunch of... So this is the Creation Club. Is it like the Bethesda Creation Club? Or because it's for both Fallout and Elder Scrolls. And it is a thing where I think some of this content starts with the mod community, but specifically what they're offering you through the system is stuff that has been approved and possibly worked on by Bethesda and is guaranteed to all work together. So it's like a sort of super streamlined mod type ecosystem, and you buy them with points. I don't know what they're called, but it's a intermediary currency where you have to buy a certain number of points and then you spend those points on the mods and stuff. And one of the things they showed was I think they called it they might even call it a dwarven mud crab, but properly it should be called a Dwemer mud crab. But it was a mud crab wearing golden armor, which looked really familiar to me. And I thought, where do I know that from? And didn't we do a joke about this in PC Gamer? Wasn't like after horse armor was a huge, horse armor being sort of the famous first misstep in DLC, which in retrospect looks not at all stupid or crazy. It looks like the people sell way worse things than that for way more money these days.
It's pioneering.
Because it was first, it got a lot of the flack. And so we were only too happy to jump on that PC Gamer. And when Skyrim came out, it was like, oh, what's the first DLC for this going to be? Probably fucking armor for a crab. And so we did a back page where we pretended that the first DLC for Skyrim was armor for mud crabs. And I feel like I wrote this, but I don't want to say it for sure because I'm.
I know Marsh did the picture.
Yeah, so I think I remember commissioning him for that. So I think I was in charge of this at least. So we commissioned Marsh to basically add armor to a mud crab, and he did a brilliant job. And he added beautiful golden armor in the Dwemer style. And I think what happened is in the meantime, between then and now, a modder made that. Like they saw our back page and thought that's cool, let's do it. Or that's funny, let's do it. And I think I might even remember seeing this mod before now, but I kind of forgotten. And then Bethesda, I'm pretty sure intentionally pulled that particular mod into their showcase of what kind of mods you could find in the Creation Club. And so they showed this Dwemer armor crab. And it's not just the concept of putting dwarven armor on a mud crab. It is literally the same armor.
It is Marsh's armor. It is Marsh's crab armor.
Which is kind of beautiful.
What a journey we've all been on.
Indeed.
But it's such a strange... It's an interesting decision on their part because we were taking the piss out of them for charging money for silly things. And this, they knew... that, like, they didn't even have to guess because they've done it before. They've done paid mods in Skyrim before and they literally just reversed it. They cancelled out of it because the negative reaction was so strong. So they knew they were going to get a whole load of backlash about this, about the value of those mods and the idea of paying for things that were previously free. And they chose to show a mod that I'm pretty sure was previously free and was the object of ridicule from PC Gamer for being, look what idiotic stuff they could do for money.
In a way, this is Todd Howard's way of saying that you can't touch him. He can do what he likes.
Yep.
Your back page jokes have no power over people. It turns out.
it's I feel pretty positive about the whole thing. I'm glad it exists.
I
think their system is probably a net positive. I'm glad they're doing it. I know a lot of people are upset about it, but I think it will just give a new way for people to charge money for things. They can still release for free mods if they want, and that will continue to happen for sure.
It feels like this will be the norm in a few years. They're just like one of the first people to really be.
Yeah, I mean, I
were first with horse armor.
Yeah, exactly. I just said how much flack they caught for being first with DLC when what they were doing with DLC is something we just accept as normal these days, and someday paid mods will also be accepted that way. Should we do questions?
Yes, why not? Of course, Tom. Great suggestion. Let's do it right now.
Smooth.
Yeah. Aled writes, do you think there will ever be an E3 where there isn't an iteration of Skyrim shown?
This was pretty surreal. Like, Skyrim came up like 3 different times in this E3, and this is a 6.
Skyrim came out the month I joined PC Gamer. And now, 3 months after I left PC Gamer, after a career spanning more than 5 years, it is still at E3.
In a way, there's some nice element to it, in that, like, this is... I'm glad Bethesda is successful, and I'm glad this particular kind of game is successful, because there was a time when them doing this seemed like suicide. It was like everyone else was doing MMOs, and they were just making a world the size of an MMO, but saying, oh no, it's only, you just buy it once, you don't have to pay a subscription, and it's not multiplayer. And I remember thinking, like, shit, I love that game, but this doesn't make any commercial sense. And so it's cool that, you know, you can sell that one game for 6 years, and, you know, it does amazing on Steam, even if they'd never done any special editions or remasters or anything, it would still have sold really well on Steam for like 3 years after release. And now they're just putting it on every platform, and all the consoles seem really happy to have it.
It's good. It's good. The game deserves that recognition, I think.
I mean, this sort of ties into the fact that they sort of announced that they're not working on a sequel.
Yeah.
But why would you need to when you can just keep selling Skyrim?
That was kind of surprising to me, because this is the kind of time where we're all expecting there to be a new Elder Scrolls game, and okay, we're not expecting it to be released today, but they tend to announce these things 1 year before they come out, and if it's going to come out next year, they'll announce it now, and so the fact they haven't announced it yet, and then the fact that they're not even working on it, these things surely take at least 2 years, so I feel like we're not going to get it for a while.
It tends to be like 5 years between Bethesda RPGs, so there's a long lead time on those. It's just they're working on something that isn't Elder Scrolls or Fallout.
There's a rumour that they're working on a space game.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
It feels like, I don't know, Elder Scrolls just seems like there are some series where I don't want them to do regular iterations and just endlessly do it, but like Elder Scrolls feels like this a really good concept that they have not at all, you know, finished. They're nowhere close to living out the potential of that. There's so much more to do. There's so much more to improve. Every Elder Scrolls game is always like, we're doing a million different things, and so yes, the individual things are not quite up to scratch, but we're getting better each time. And so the combat is getting better each time, and the magic is getting better each time, and the level up system is getting better each time. And the world, just like the richness of the world, how good it looks, but then also just how much stuff there is in there. I remember, like, Oblivion, much as I loved it, really fell short of like Fallout 3. Fallout 3 just had an incredible amount of stuff to do, and then Skyrim, one of the reasons it was so good was it was like Oblivion's sort of setting, not setting exactly, but, you know, fantasy, plus Fallout 3's richness of world, and they finally joined those two things, but there's still so much more to do in those areas. So
it was a brilliant open world at the time when open worlds weren't everywhere like they are today.
Yeah.
And so the sense of scale and the kind of...
I think it remains a brilliant open world, actually, because it's not farmed out into tiny parcels of repetitive tasks. It's, you know, it's a meaningful space.
Yeah, and when you go from one end to the other, it really feels like a journey. The sort of organic moving from a forest into the flat lands, and then over the mountains to the north and onto those beautiful frozen wastes just to the north there. Like, I still feels like a place in my mind still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I think the funny thing about Elder Scrolls is, like, to continue that point, is like every different element of Elder Scrolls could stand to be better. The thing I think that slows them down is that those iterative improvements from an official kind of Bethesda point of view happen with a new game, which also involves remaking everything else about the game, from the landscape to everything else. This is one of the reasons that the kind of value of those games is found in their mods, because mods allow players to go in and do those combat improvements that finally get to the combat to where it should be, and do those magic or level up or experiential improvements that get everything else about the experience where it should be, unburdened from the requirement of making a new story, a new world, a new set of quests, a new set of everything else. And that's maybe the real Skyrim 2 was the mods we made along the way.
Bethesda have absolutely taken that stuff on board. Like, I remember there's an archery mod for Oblivion that Bethesda specifically cited as being the inspiration for how archery works in Skyrim. So they look at the mods for their games and realize which things work and which things don't.
I think they'd be insane if that wasn't the case, right? Like, I mean, presumably, talking about Firaxis earlier, like, they should do that as well, and clearly do. Like, look at what people do with their games and apply it. Next up, I think I'm pronouncing this right. Jörg writes, "Hello, Kiste und Breckeisen. Recently, I attended a lecture about religion and ethics in games. One of the games mentioned was This War of Mine. Obviously, it wasn't for the religious symbology in that game, but for the unique way to show that everything you do has consequences. For example, if you steal bread from one apartment to help your group to survive, you may well condemn the owners of the apartment to starvation. It came to me that I'd love that mechanic in RPGs. In many of them, you can rather selfishly loot NPC houses without consequence, as long as you're not caught. Now imagine that after you stole everything from one of the poor NPCs, you met the victim begging in the street next time you enter the village, or see them bury their starved family member. Or if you loot the whole village, the people there might become so desperate that they try to mug every traveller who enters. I think it would help a great deal to make people move from pure power fantasies to more serious role-playing. It might also open up more valuable moral decisions than just choosing of two options to answer in a dialogue. It also might be good for emergent stories." He goes on to ask if we can think of other features that you may have seen in one game that might enhance another, and says, "Greetings from good old Germany and Prost, everybody." I actually think that's a really cool idea. That's not. The nice thing about this is it's not like, why can't we talk to the monsters level, sort of unrealistic what-ifery. It's actually like within the realms of possibility that you can accidentally create a bandit camp by stealing everything in a poor village.
Yeah, so there is a history of features like this in RPGs in particular, and the sort of unexpected problem is that actually simulating this stuff is fairly easy. Like, it's all pretty logical, and we can do that. That technology exists, and the problem that always comes up is that the player doesn't know it's happening. And it's about how you communicate that this is happening to the player. Like that scene of, the family burying the person who starved to death because of the food you stole. Why do you see that? When does that happen? Is that, scripted trigger when you next enter the settlement? Or is it a cutscene that pulls you away from the game you're playing? Usually the problem is we can make that happen, but the player will never notice it. Or if we force the player to notice it, it becomes really jarring and weird. And one of the classic examples of this is Ultima Online, which is obviously an incredibly ancient game. They had a system where if you sort of killed all the animals in a forest, the dragon that was living in the cave nearby ran out of food. And so because it couldn't find any food from the forest, it would go and attack the village. So you killing all those boars and stuff had actually caused this dragon to attack the village. It sounds like an amazing story, except that you never knew that was happening. It was just like the fucking dragons attacking the fucking village for some reason. No one knew why it was happening. And
humans.
So it didn't produce any good stories. It was just a random weird event that people just took in isolation. And so the challenge there is not the level of simulation, which we can easily achieve. It's the how do you communicate what's happening in the simulation to the player. There's actually kind of a different, but in Oblivion, there is an orc who is on a drug run. She will go to, I want to say like Breville, and deposit some moon sugar in a barrel and pick up her payment from another location there, and then walk all the way to another city in the land. And if you follow her, you can see her walk the entire route. If you don't, it'll just happen on a schedule, and she'll arrive at the time she should have arrived because they had a system for that. and deliver her drugs and take her money and just go on a circuit like that. And that I only know that because I read the official guide, and that was written by people who knew how the game worked internally. And I feel like probably no player would ever know that was happening. But it related, I don't think it related to any quest exactly, but there were some references to there being a drug ring. And that stuff, it probably didn't take anyone very long once they had the system, that simulated, I guess it was Radiant AI, was it called that back then?
It was, yeah.
They had that system, and that's probably really easy to program, but it's really hard to get the player to ever know that's happening. And sure enough, no one does know that's happening unless they read the guidebook.
I can see the benefit of stuff though, because when players do figure out why things have gone different for them, like especially now in the age of sharing all this stuff, I think those sorts of not flagged reactions to player action can actually potentially be revealed to the player through other means. Like, I think if you have a game that does react in that kind of way to the things the player does, but someone doesn't find that out until they watch someone play it on Twitch and something different happens, or they watch someone play it on YouTube and something different happens, that's probably fine.
Yeah.
I think, maybe it's more viable now than it used to be for that reason.
Yeah, I think maybe if you sort of move away from MMOs and start to look at single player stuff, the ways that can go differently get exposed better these days.
Yeah, for sure. Worth mentioning, Tom, I think you mentioned it during the break.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger has puts you on trial at one point and confronts you with everything you've done in the game up to that point. Well, a series of things that's kind of flagged.
This is like Star Trek Next Generation.
So, for example, if someone drops a pendant in the opening town, and you can pick it up and keep it, or you can pick it up and run up to them and give it back. And if you keep it at the trial, they go, "Why did you keep this pendant?" And you have to sort of defend your actions, and you get hauled through the courts for everything you've done, which is, again, you're right. Like, that is a way of flagging to the player what's happened, and the fact that you're being watched and these things are being noticed is really powerful. But it is like you do need a big conceit like that to actually deliver that information.
Next up, Diffraction writes, "Hello, Creighton Crowbar. What is a question, if not a grudge, that seeks to be ended?"
Wow.
Pretty deep. "My grudge is that co-op games require friends to play all the same way." It's crucial that I ended that sentence. "Too many need everyone to play at the same speed, for the same reasons, and, worst of all, at the same skill level. Are there any games that end this grudge? Are there any games that go further, that have asynchronous co-op, or even co-op across genres? The closest I came was Minecraft. A friend could run off into caves and mine and fight, and he would return with loot to a sturdy, well-organized house with food and equipment ready. I want more experiences like that. Regards, Diffractor."
Annoyingly, I can't remember the name of the game, but I think actually multiple games, but there's at least one game where one of you plays a hacker and the other of you plays a spy, and the hacker is the one who can turn off security cameras and disable doors and stuff, but they literally only see a map, and the spy is the one who's actually running through the corridors and needs to sort of wait for the hacker to do their thing.
I think this was the thing that was great about MMOs. Like, an MMO in my kind of formative years with that genre was always about big communities of people all engaged with the game differently. I think, I've spoken already on this episode about how I respect games that sort of boil down multiplayer experiences just to their kind of practical essentials. But the thing I admired about MMOs for a long time was that they brought together people with divergent playstyles and found a way for them all to contribute to a single goal. Dark Age of Camelot being the best example of that, I think, but other MMOs have done it as well. Maybe one of the reasons to be excited about games like Sea of Thieves is because it promises that kind of, like, if you want to be the person who navigates, you can do that. If you want to be the person who does the swashbuckling, firing themselves out of cannon stuff, that you can do that.
Yeah, that demo they showed, they had a whole long puzzle section where sort of three of them went into this cave and they solved riddles about the boar shrine and taking 10 steps northeast and then digging for treasure. And then when they got back to the beach, they were attacked by skeletons, and those skeletons were killed by cannons fired from their ship, because someone just stayed on the ship that entire time. And it made for a cool video, but I can't help wondering what that person was doing for the other 15 minutes of that demo.
Alt tab. Happily alt tab. But no, I can totally see that. That sounds fun. I think there's
if you, I don't know, if I was in that group and you said, hey, we're going to go and solve the school puzzle, you wait on the ship, I'd be like, can I go and solve the puzzle?
So maybe this is a me thing. I love being the person who waits in the car.
Actually, funny enough, that particular example I don't like the idea of, but one of the coolest co-op experiences I had was with you, Chris, and my job was literally to just wait, and that's all I did. And it was GTA 5, I guess.
Oh yeah,
where we were doing a sort of co-op assassination, and it was this villa, and if the target was alerted, they were going to run to their sports car and leave through their driveway. And so your job was to break in and see if you could assassinate him. If you failed, he was going to run to his car and escape through the driveway. We knew where the driveway was, so I stood at the end of the driveway with a sniper rifle, and I, pulled up in my car and blocked it with my car, and then got out, just stood next to my car with my sniper rifle, just waiting. And I had no idea what you were doing. I didn't get to see any of the cool things you were doing. But my job was literally, if you fail, when he comes this way, I'm going to shoot him in the fucking face.
Yeah, that's great.
And you didn't fail. You did it. So nothing happened at all, but I still felt super cool just being this is my role.
Because then your job, becomes pick me up, right? I come sprinting over the fence, guards in tow. And yeah, I love, some of my favorite things in co-op games are the sort of idle moments, or the just facilitating things. It's the reason I love PlanetSide, which is a game that I think has not had a, PlanetSide 2 came along, and it seems it must be still going. I don't know what happened to it since SOE became Daybreak, etc., etc. But the great joy of PlanetSide would be I just fly the dropship. I just drop the people off at this endless front line of combat and do something else. That kind of asymmetry and pacing, I think, is super cool for co-op games. I had it earlier today in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, just being the guy who drives the Jeep. You guys go off and rob the houses, I'll drive the car. And that particular run for me ended with us discovering a big load of an opposing team of players on the opposite side of a ridgeline. And I'd not got any good guns in that run. All the buildings I'd looted had just been rubbish, and I only had a shotgun. And I knew I had to go because we were going to be recording this podcast. So as everyone else crawled on their bellies up to the top of the ridgeline, I just sort of went, guys, I'm going to distract them, and kicked the Jeep into gear and drove over the ridge at fast movement. I just drove straight at the enemies, and the Jeep catches fire and everything. But as those guys expose themselves to shoot at me, my team opens fire from the ridgeline, and I die in a blaze of glory. And that was, those kind of moments of sort of asymmetry, and not everyone being dragged along at the same pace as the rest of the team, are kind of what makes co-op good. It's the reason that the defining example of bad co-op for me remains Borderlands, weirdly. And the reason for that, despite it being a good game, is because it's both a long form game and a very kind of technical game when it comes to loot and stuff. It's actually tremendously boring if you're not at the same pace as each other. Diablo suffers in the same way, where if you don't all want to go for a town break to look at loot and compare stats, that's bad as well.
Yeah, there's actually I'm a big City of Heroes fan, and I did like City of Villains, and for the most part City of Villains was the only time in MMO I've already had a guild that I played with regularly, and it that was great. But the game mechanics themselves did not suit it that well, because the class I was playing was I want to say a brawler or something, and their thing was as they dealt damage, they built up some kind of, I don't know, an adrenaline meter. But it wasn't just when it was full it did something cool. It was as it was building, it was a multiplier to all your damage. So the more you'd fought, the better you were. And everyone else was just losing health in combat, and they needed to heal and rest after combat. And my character was after combat, that's my fucking prime time. I'm ready to go. Bring on the next hardest thing. I can take on something that's twice as hard as what we just did, because I'm super powered right now. And no one else had a mechanic like that. Everyone else was we're exhausted, we need to heal. And so that just created this unnecessary dichotomy between me and everyone else. I want to fight. Everyone else was no, we need to rest. And so, okay, we can rest, and I'll lose all my bonus. Fine.
Next question comes from Malcav11, who writes, "Hi, Command and Conquer. One of the celebrated features of recently PC-ified platinum game Vanquish is a dedicated button for smoking a cigarette. In a recent RPS article about Interstate 76, much was made of the game's dedicated poetry button. Are there any such quality single-purpose controls you can think of? Best Malcav11."
I used to use... So in Team Fortress 2, there's taunts. And there's different taunts depending on not just your class, but also what weapon you're currently using. And as the spy, if you bring out the cigarette case, which is sort of your disguise-ometer, if you taunt, then you kind of it is a cigarette case, and so you take a cigarette out and smoke it, and then flick it away. And that was always, because it was the most casual of taunts, it was always the best one to use on anyone's after you killed anybody. It just looked like you had all the time in the world, you had nothing better to do, and you just smoke a cigarette, flick it away. Yeah, that was cool.
Cargo Commander is an example. It's a 2D game about exploring procedurally generated space wrecks that you suck onto your vessel when you go in and loot them. But it has a button that lets you swear, I think.
Yeah.
That's it. And the dude swears.
I really like that game. I don't actually remember the swear button, but that's it's a really good game. Everyone should play it. It
is good.
It didn't do that well, but it was a game where you press a big magnet button and it will pull in other wrecks to your kind of inside a ship from a side-on perspective and platformer type view, and it would bring in other basically platformer levels, which were essentially other ships, but at random angles. You know, it'd just be governed by physics as to how they collided with your ship, and then you could sort of launch yourself out of your ship and go through space and land in theirs, and then fight enemies inside and grab loot and stuff. And it was really well done. It had one of my favorite tutorials ever. It had this like really nice to-do list system where it just gave you like 5 different things that you got to do, and each one you did, it would just tick it off, and it made it really satisfying rather than a chore. And then also the other cool thing it did was that every, because they're randomly generated levels, each one would be a seed, and those seeds would be consistent across everyone's games. And so, you know, I was a PC gamer at the time, and we just sort of typed in the word PC gamer and saw what galaxy that led to and what challenges that led to, and then shared that amongst our community and said, hey, anyone who wants to try the PC gamer galaxy, try that, and you'll be facing the same rules we did, and you can compare your score to ours. So I had that system, which was really cool.
Next question comes from Pierre, who writes, "Dear Date and Lowbar, Chris, you are unfortunately quite wrong about Mass Effect Andromeda. In your narrative, the fact that it was secretly a great game was just obscured by the overwhelming popular narrative of the faces look funny. I believe lots of other shortcomings are also to blame. Among those is just the terrible way it deals with alienness. When I first touched down on the Angaran planet, I was expecting to discover an anthropologically analyze a whole new, utterly different sentient species, their way of life shaped by their isolation from the Milky Way and our boring ways of doing things. Instead, I touched down in a city that might as well have been Neo-Portugal, speaking and understanding their language within seconds. Crossing galaxies seems to involve a similar level of culture shock as going from Belgium to the Netherlands. This destroyed any interest I had in exploring a new galaxy and had me quit the game. This leads me to this broader question. What games have achieved a decent depiction of real aliens? You know, like the good stuff in Arrival. Thanks for the pods and a walloping Guten Tag from Germany, Pierre." So, actually, I think this is a reasonable point in abstract, but completely BioWare set themselves up with a really interesting problem where they needed to move Mass Effect to somewhere where it couldn't be affected by the events of the original series if they were going to move it forwards.
Because otherwise they'd have to deal with the million different consequences.
The vast consequences of the end of Shepard's trilogy. However, Mass Effect as a series is utterly the wrong place to do aliens. Like, Mass Effect is about relationships, and it's about characters, that develop and grow in ways you understand. And while on paper, the idea of going to a new galaxy and encountering a new alien culture, but they're all sentient blobs of jelly, and you have no way of meaningfully communicating them whatsoever, and no analogies with which to understand their culture. It's good on paper, but it would be an utter disaster from the point of view of what you expect to be able to do in a Mass Effect game. And actually, from that, like, I made a joke about this on Twitter. Like, when they first showed the Angara in the trailer, I had a pop at the fact that, like, clearly ski jackets had evolved in 2 separate galaxies. And so I kind of get it, but at the same time, like, the game goes on a meaningful journey with the Angara. Like, there is a big twist with regards to the Angara. Jarl, who is your Angaran crewmate, has a really cool arc that establishes his peoples. It's kind of weird that life in the Andromeda Galaxy is also bipedal and can quickly speak a language analogous to English, but it is also utterly necessary for the type of game that is. And I don't think that's basically, like, while I can understand the criticism of they could have done more aliens, I think they would have made a dramatically worse game had they done so.
Yeah, I think, like, truly aliens. I mean, I guess, like, the Hanar are maybe the closest they've come, of, like, weird jellyfish. There is no Hanar crewmate. There is no strong Hanar relationships. I do think that, like, the Krogan and the Elcor are good examples of... I mean, the Krogan are bipedal, but they do look really different to other bipedal races. There's a whole different physical build to them. They don't have, like, what I would call, like, the Star Trek phenomenon, where it's a actor with some clay on them.
I had a weird shower thought the other day, which was that if you were a human in, like, either the Star Wars or the Star Trek universes, with a talent for making prosthetics, you could pretend to be literally any alien from those universes.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the cool things about Mass Effect, was just that, I mean, the Turians are very humanoid in a lot of ways, but they have those backwards legs, and there's something insecty about them, obviously. And yeah, I remember really liking the Krogan just for, like, how different their whole sort of profile was and how their stance was. In a way that Angarans, I'm failing to appreciate all of their individuality, but in my mind they get stored as basically Twi'leks.
They look a bit like Twi'leks. They've got, I mean, there's a good, like, a lot of Andromeda is setting up arcs for future games that may now unfortunately not happen. And actually, like, so the thing with the Angara is they are meaningfully different from the other races in the Mass Effect universe to that point. Like, they have, BioWare found a way of inserting a new alien race that wasn't the Asari, wasn't the Turians, and wasn't the Krogan, and was something else, and had its own story and had its own challenges. What it isn't is utterly alien to anything from the Milky Way, which is the thing promised by the Andromeda setting. And I completely get that. Like, it's a reasonable thing to expect. However, I think the fault doesn't lie with the Angara specifically, so much as the fact that by moving to Andromeda, Bio almost need to be more honest about the fact that we're moving to Andromeda so we're not beholden to those choices, not so that we can offer some sort of, like, H.R. Geiger crazy alien experience that is completely different to what has come before. Because if you expect that from Mass Effect, like, I just think it's the wrong game to expect that from.
Yeah.
Like, where do the choices come in if you can't speak to them because your languages have no value? Like, where does the relationship building stuff come in if it's just unknowable? Like,
yeah, I mean, they could be, if you want to make them different, they could literally just be a cloud of gas, and that's the easiest thing in the world to show. And if they can't talk to you, that's the easiest thing in the world to write. And it's not hard to do that. So I agree that they should be a communicable race that is in some way relatable to us. And actually, now that I say it, maybe the Krogan is the only example of what I would have liked, because things like the Elcor and the Volus, who are very physically different to the other humanoid races, they work because they're in the context of, like, 7 other species. if there were the one new species, if the one new species of the Volus, they're kind of like a bit of a comedy race. They're kind of like, oh, look at us, we're silly. And the Elcor obviously are a comedy race. They're great, but they are. It's a single joke.
There is a lack of variety in Andromeda that's a bigger problem than the supposed alienness of its aliens. Like, because in the first Mass Effect game, you meet Krogan, Turian.
You do meet all of them at once.
Yeah, and it's this amazing feeling of just like suddenly a culture clash or a culture shock almost. And then you go to Andromeda, and there's one. The Angorans are cool and interesting, I think. But then the bad guys are just the most fucking staid bad guys, and there's a complete precursor race that's also, I've seen all that before, and it's doesn't look or feel particularly interesting, and it lacks that variety, even though you're going.
I think so. A lot of that stuff is, and this is one of the things. Like, I think the fact that Andromeda put so many people off so quickly is a shame, because all of that stuff becomes fucking great in the late game. Like at the end of that campaign, I think a lot of that stuff is justified, and the stuff about the Ket that is really cool, and the stuff about the precursor race that is really interesting and sets it up relative, specifically to the Reapers in a way that sort of. I think now I feel comfortable talking about it now, because like it feels like now there's probably not going to be an Andromeda 2, which is a huge fucking shame. But they set up a lot of stuff that I think would have meaningfully bounced off themes of the original game without doing exactly the same things again. However, on the surface, I think they played it too safe with those ideas. And they didn't front load them enough. Like I say, I think the last act of Andromeda saves so many of its big ideas.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't have been an open world game.
No,
in their version of an open world game anyway, just put too much stuff in the way of the exciting things about Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there are some things that come through the open world, but like all of those big kind of revelations I'm talking about are like the final 3 big story missions of that game kind of give you as the first Mass Effect game did. Like, this is the thing I was coming back to with that game, is that it has so many of the same failings and successes as the first Mass Effect game. For example, it holds its best kind of plot cards for some crucial late game missions that a lot of players probably aren't going to see. Like, you got to imagine the time it came out, a lot of Mass Effect 1 players didn't go to Vermeer, and then didn't find out that this big weird spaceship that looks like a squid called Sovereign was actually this thing called a Reaper. Like, you know, Andromeda has a very clear point like that, and it's that thing of not getting there means that it's no good. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but they needed more hooks in the early game then. If people aren't getting to that stage, then I think that Mass Effect 1 gives you loads and loads of hooks, because you're seeing so much new stuff and you're being introduced to so many new concepts. And it's the problem with having already played 3 games, is that most of those concepts and those races that you're surrounded by at the start of the game are very, very familiar. And it doesn't give you much new to really kind of latch onto.
And I think those open world structures have the effect of putting the brakes on in a big way as well.
And it really allows the player to spoil it for themselves by spending too much time in an area, especially because some players just love to hoover stuff up. In fact, they feel anxious if they don't hoover stuff up, and in that, if you're that sort of player, then Andromeda's a terrible game for you, because you're never going to see anything cool for a long time, which is a bit of which is a problem, sadly. It is a shame though that it's supposedly done quite badly from the sounds of it, and I just hope it doesn't discourage BioWare from making the narrative BioWare game, because I love that sort of game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, the burden on them is different, but did Mass Effect 2 and 3 introduce any new races?
No. Well, so 3 introduced actually, no, they did. So 2 introduced the Drell. So Thane.
Yeah.
Thane's race.
Oh, yeah.
He's awesome.
And
3...
What are the ones? The Vorcha with the
Vorcha with
teeth?
2. Yeah, so 3 introduced kind of... Batarians had been in it, I guess.
But then 2 is a roller coaster, wasn't it?
I don't know if Batarians were in like number 1.
So I think I figured this out close to the time, but like Andromeda's new rate of new species additions is equivalent to the other Mass Effect sequels, but not the same as Mass Effect 1. So it's not the same as reinventing the entire setting, but obviously it's not necessarily unreasonable to expect that a game that moves it to a new galaxy will reinvent the entire setting.
Mass Effect 1 is pretty amazing. Yeah. When you think back at all the things it did, all the things it established, how good it was.
And it's like it really nails an aesthetic with quite a limited tech.
Yeah, like definitely the combat is just way worse than any other Mass Effect game, including Andromeda. But almost anything else about it holds up. Like you can, and certainly just that sense of, you know, you were talking about earlier about like you were hoping for a new KOTOR and you got Mass Effect, and you know, for a moment it was disappointing, but then ended up becoming one of your favorite series. It takes such a lot of skill to make a whole new universe that is going to capture people in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and maybe that residual fondness is why I'm so forgiving of Andromeda's problems. But like, I do think it will remain deeply underrated. Like, I think there's so many things it gets so right, and character things it does so brilliantly, that it'll be such a shame for people to lose it. In terms of the question and games that get alienness right, I actually can't think of one, and the reason for that is that every game I can think of that has had a successfully evocative alien in it has had made some concessions to human perception of that alien. So the example I give is Alien Isolation, which is a game that I admire a lot, but where the developers deliberately ensured that the alien creature, which behaves in a brilliantly kind of unsettling way, still adhered to certain kind of like human logical paradigms, like having a sight cone despite not having eyes, making sounds despite not really needing to, and all of those things. Like, you still feel sort of alien and unsettling when you play it, but actually in order for that effect to happen, it needs to kind of do some things that bring it within the realms of kind of the understood. I'm a little bit skeptical of the idea that you can do a really alien in a video game and have it be a meaningful interaction with the player.
It's weird that no one's tried to. The closest things I could think of are like Tides of Numenera, where they can introduce you to very alien concepts and creatures because they just live in prose blocks.
Yeah,
they don't have to do all
this is
that
the thing.
stuff.
Like, I think prose can handle it,
Yeah,
but like
sure.
I think, you know, this is like Lovecraft's ultimate cop-out. Is you get to the end of the story, he gestures off the page at the alien that is there, and never, he says, it's indescribable and I'm mad now. And then the story ends.
Problem solved.
Like, and that's how you handle it, because as soon as you have to present it in a visual medium, it either looks silly or it doesn't, or it's not alien. As soon as you have to kind of allow people to interact with it, it's something that text can do that basically nothing else can, really, because the reality of it is that, like, you know, an alien life form could easily be something we would look at and go, oh, that's a mushroom, and it's just sitting there, and there's some fabulous interiority that we're not privy to, but to us it just looks like a mushroom, and that's probably going to be the one day when human beings discover, you know, sapient alien life, that's probably what it'll be like. Not, you know, and so in order to dramatize that, necessarily ends up getting closer to human. Like, I just don't think this idea of a alien is actually desirable on anything other than paper, literally.
No.
Yeah,
You don't want a mushroom companion.
I kind of liked in Mass Effect when you finally meet the Reaper, and
it has a very deep voice.
It has a very deep voice, and also it's just completely malevolent. It just has no sympathy for you. All your arguments you make to it just don't connect, and it's just like, I don't give a fuck what you are. You're just a pathetic germ to me. And it was kind of cliche, but thanks. It worked for me. I think because it kind of wasn't cliche at that time, at least in video games, it was kind of interesting to see an entity like that was just so unconcerned with what I thought of it. The much more amateurish mistake in sci-fi and in fantasy is to have an enemy that in any way gives a fucking shit what humans think of it. Like, that's always like, when you're writing dialogue and you're not really thinking about it, you write it as if it's a conversation between two humans, and the other human is going to care what the first human thinks about it. But actually, if one of them is an immortal robot god, they should probably actually react to that differently and just say, I'm not trying to justify myself to you. My job is not to, make myself make sense to you. I'm literally going to reap all life.
It's one of the reasons
There's
that
nothing you can do about it.
Mass Effect 2 undermined the Reapers a little bit by having Harbinger kind of taunt you throughout the entire game.
Yeah, that bothered me.
Like saying like, oh god, this time, Shepard, I got you. Oh shit.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Like,
I know you feel this, Shepard.
Yeah, you're feeling this.
And I care for some reason.
Yeah, like, the more they talk, the worse it gets. Aliens.
But yeah, that's the best kind of take on aliens that has come up. You can make a much more realistic take on aliens, but it ends up not being as scary. Like, you know, the sort of cross-section between scary and not human is the type of alien that hates us for some reason that we don't fully understand, and that is completely immune to all our lines of reasoning, which kind of Prey does as well. They try and delve into the science of it a bit. I don't know how effective it really is, but they talk about how the aliens have no mirror neurons, so they can't empathize. Like, they can't imagine what's going on in another brain. All they can do is just sort of, I don't know.
It's actually, well, I mean, it's the same reason that Alien is a brilliant piece of alien conception, because, and I mean that in a couple of different ways. Like, the brilliant thing about Alien as a piece of fiction is that the creature itself is the head crab, or the facehugger. It's and it's sufficiently kind of unnerving and unnatural. The monster it creates is 50% alien, 50% human, and therefore can kind of behave according to kind of believable norms while still being alien for the duration of the movie, but without losing its kind of unmapped kind of alien component. Like, the creature you see in the Alien movies is what happens when a facehugger impregnates a human being and creates something with their DNA. And that leaves something to the imagination about what this creature actually is. That stuff is ruined if you go and watch Prometheus. Like, where it's just a big man. A big man did it, is the answer. A big punchy man did it. But for that movie, it works perfectly. And actually, there's something in the fiction of Prey as well, where the Typhon are pretty alien until the point where they start mimicking humans, at which point the creatures you're fighting, the phantoms, are mimicked humans, which is kind of an interesting idea. And that's a way of getting there. But I feel like you still need to ground it in human context in order to make it function. Yeah. It's just how you do that. And, you know, those two things I think do it right.
In retrospect, the sort of notion that they don't have mirror neurons clashes a bit with the idea that they can actually mimic anything they see. That kind of seems like, well, maybe you don't call them mirror neurons, but they've sure got something that can understand what
they can empathise with the cup.
Yeah, they know how the cup feels.
They're all cupheads.
Nice.
We're all cupheads now. Like, we're all sons of bitches.
Our final question comes from Evan, who writes, Dear CNC, thank you for the excellent podcast. I was playing Dawn of War 2 the other day, hyping up for the new iteration of the game. At some point, you travel to the planet Meridian, where the narrative mentions its billions of inhabitants, and how they should be protected from the life-sucking Tyranids. Then it struck me, where are all these people? I apologise, I sneezed. I'm not much into Warhammer lore, but all battlefields seem to be void of anything but the engaged parties, which may make sense in the Warhammer universe, but it made me thinking about how civilians are represented in other RTSs. The only RTS I could think of that actually had civilians to protect on the battlefield was Red Alert. Then, in the Age of Empires, villages are resource galleries, but they still are a game unit. There is no affection towards them apart from the frustration that comes with the ruin of one's economy. There are way too many RTSs, and I haven't played but a tiny fraction of them, so is there an RTS that involves decision-making based on the civilian populace? Does it make sense to you that an RTS that tries to capture the horror of war in regards to civilians? Thanks for reading, Evan.
Yes.
That's all correct. No.
I once reviewed a game called Joint Task Force, which is pretty good. I gave it a good review. I can't remember exactly what score I gave it, but it was I generally liked it. It didn't get any real attention, but it was, I guess, Joint Task Force, the title was referring to some kind of, I don't know, like NATO strike team or whatever. But it was a persistent game mechanic that there would be TV news crews on your missions. So you would be out there trying to take out like terrorists or, you know, insurgent factions or whatever. But there would be civilians as well. And it would be way easier to take out the enemies if you didn't care about civilians, and if you could just call in airstrikes and kill everyone in a certain location. But if you did that, the TV news crews would see you do that, and that would affect your reputation. And so you're kind of like, how you were viewed in the international community was an ongoing mechanic, and you had to worry about that. What I can't remember is, like, could you just kill the TV news crews? I feel like, I don't think you could have directly attacked them, but what if you called in an airstrike that happened to destroy them? I can't remember whether, the events that were recorded were physically tied to a particular unit on the battlefield that if it disappeared would not record what you did. But the general gist of it was that you had to be responsible. It was like you couldn't do things that were incredibly immoral because it was just being seen by everybody, so you would lose support. You had to care about civilians on the battlefield.
XCOM 2 terror missions is the whole point of those missions is to get civilians out of the area by making contact with them before the aliens get them.
Those fucking civilians, though.
Yeah,
they
right.
Are idiots.
Yeah, they're not.
They are
not useful.
Yeah, there's something where Graham is the one who had a real problem with this. But it's something like, certainly if you move through their sort of rescue zone on your turn, but you don't end your turn within it.
Yeah, they're not rescued.
That's a problem. But then there's another problem where, like, I think Graham was telling me about one that sounded like I'd had my own troubles with these kinds of missions, but this was a new one to me. They run away from things, and if you're like standing in location X and it's outside of their rescue radius, and then on their turn they get scared and they run to you, so now that X is in their rescue radius, they don't get rescued. So on your turn, it's like, what the fuck? You're already in their radius, but you still got to kind of make a move to have it register that they're there. I think, so this is like secondhand, so I'm pretty sure this is Graham's complaint, not mine. But I think that's the situation he encountered. And yeah, I think I've had the same thing where if you move into their radius, great, you rescue them. But if they move into your radius, it doesn't count, and you have to sort of like just waste a move to make it register.
Yeah, that's stupid. So that maybe is part of an answer to the question, is that often it's super irritating to put civilians into a war zone that you have to care about when you kind of want to be using the cool units you have. Plus, lots of games just aren't trying to be harrowing in that way and wasting civilians in front of you. That
concept of public protection, though, I'm surprised it's not a bigger deal. It seems like a good game mechanic in general, just to have like, here are some terrorists, but there are civilians in amongst them. And then immediately you've got like, okay, some methods of dealing with the terrorists can be super precise and therefore not ever kill civilians, and others are cheaper, but you're going to risk collateral damage. That's a real tension that people deal with on a regular basis. And I won't say that war games don't deal with that, because I don't follow war games closely enough to say that. But yeah, it's never bubbled up into kind of the mainstream.
That is all of the questions we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode of the Crate and Crowbar, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also send us a question on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. Crate Crowbar is very kindly supported by your Patreon donations. Not you specifically, person listening to this, but you in a kind of general sense. But maybe you specifically. I don't know. If you'd like it to be you specifically, you can visit patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar to find out more about crowdfunding. Our Patreon supports things like the Miniatures Monthly podcast that me and Tom do, and the Bloodborne weekly video playthrough that me and Tom do. New episodes every Sunday. We're pretty excited about what's coming up.
Some good ones.
Because it's very silly. If you enjoy the podcast, it's very helpful to us if you could leave a review on iTunes or press the star button wherever you might find one, because that's how podcast gets made, I guess. If you would like to follow us as individuals, I'm on Twitter at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom F is
at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
Tom S is
at PCG Ludo, Ludio. Thanks
Thanks for listening,
Everybody.
everybody.